1968 by Philip K. Dick. Read by Stephen Carpenter.
This book was originally created for audio cassette playback. Any announcements concerning cassettes do not apply to this recording. This version contains markers allowing direct access to major portions of the book.
Library of Congress annotation. In the year 2021, Rick Deckard is employed on a dying Earth as a bounty hunter. He seeks androids that look like humans and destroys them. Basis for the 1982 movie Blade Runner, 1968. From the book jacket. Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep was published in 1968. Grim and foreboding, even today it is a masterpiece ahead of its time. By 2021, the World War had killed millions, driving entire species into extinction and sending mankind off planet. Those who remained coveted any living creature, and for people who couldn't afford one, companies built incredibly realistic simulacra. Horses, birds, cats, sheep. They even built humans. Immigrants to Mars received androids so sophisticated it was impossible to tell them from true men or women. Fearful of the havoc these artificial humans could wreak, the government banned them from Earth. But when androids didn't want to be identified, they just blended in. Rick Deckard was an officially sanctioned bounty hunter whose job was to find rogue androids and to retire them. But when cornered, androids tended to fight back, with deadly results. About the author. Philip K. Dick was born in Chicago in 1928. He attended the University of California at Berkeley, but dropped out rather than participate in mandatory ROTC training. Remaining in California, he began writing professionally in 1952, ultimately producing 36 novels and 5 short story collections. He won the 1962 Hugo Award for The Man in the High Castle and the 1974 John W. Campbell Memorial Award for Flow My Tears, the Policeman Said. Dick died in 1982 of heart failure following a stroke. Other books by Philip K. Dick. Confessions of a Crap Artist. The Divine Invasion. Galactic Pot Healer. The Game Players of Titan. Martian Time Slip. A Maze of Death. Now Wait for Last Year. A Scanner Darkly. The Three Stigmata of Palmer Eldritch. The Transmigration of Timothy Archer. Ubik. Valis. We Can Build You. The World Jones Made. Publisher's note. In 1968, Philip K. Dick wrote Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep, a brilliant SF novel that became the source of the motion picture Blade Runner. Though the novel's characters and backgrounds differ in some respects from those of the film, readers who enjoy the latter will discover an added dimension of encountering the original work. Del Rey Books is pleased to return this classic novel to print. To Tim and Serena Powers, my dearest friends. Philip K. Dick. An introduction by Roger Zelazny. 1. Once there was a man who repaired trash compactors because that was what he loved doing more than anything else in the world. 2. Once there was a man who repaired trash compactors in a society short on building materials where properly compacted trash could be used as an architectural base. 3. Once there was a man who hated trash compactors but repaired them for a living and to keep his manic wife in tranquilizers so that he did not have to spend so much time with his mistress, who was less fun now that she had converted to the new religion. 4. Once there was a man who, in purposely misassembling the trash compactors he hated, produced a machine which... It is no good. I can't do it. I can play the 13 ways of looking at a trash compactor repairman game, but I cannot turn it into a story at once puzzling, poignant, grotesque, philosophical, satirical, and fun. There is a very special way of doing this, and the first step in its mastery involves being Philip K. Dick. Brian Aldiss has called him one of the masters of present-day discontents, a thing readily apparent in much of his work. But one of the great fascinations his work holds for me simply that I consider it a form of aesthetic cheating to compare one writer with another, but I cannot think of another writer with whom to compare Philip Dick. All this suggests Pirandello, which is not bad for the one small aspect of reality shuffling, but Pirandello's was basically a destructive machine. It was a triumph of technique over convention, possessed of but one basic message, no matter what was fed into the chopper. Philip Dick's is a far more complicated program. His management of a story takes you from here to there in a God-knows-how, seemingly haphazard fashion, which, upon reflection, follows a logical line of development, but only on reflection. While you are trapped within the spell of its telling, you are in no better position than one of its invariably overwhelmed characters when it comes to seeing what will happen next. These characters are often victims, prisoners, manipulated men and women. It is generally doubtful whether they will leave the world with less evil in it than they found there, but you never know. They try. They are usually at bat in the last half of the ninth inning, with the tying run on base, 2 men out, 2 strikes, and 3 balls right, with the possibility of the game being called on account of rain and in the second. But then, what is rain? Or a ballpark? The worlds through which Philip Dick's characters move are subject to cancellation or revision without notice. Reality is approximately as dependable as a politician's promise. Whether it is a drug, a time warp, a machine, or even an entity responsible for the bewildering shifting of situations about his people, the result is the same. Reality, of the capital R variety, has become as relative a thing as the dryness of our respective martinis. Yet the struggle goes on, the fight continues. Against what? Ultimately, powers, principalities, thrones, and dominations, all contained in hosts who are themselves victims, prisoners, manipulated men and women. All of this sounds like grimly serious fare. Wrong. Strike the grimly, add a comma, and the following. But one of the marks of Philip Dick's mastery lies in the tone of his work. He is possessed of a sense of humor for which I am unable to locate an appropriate adjective. Dry, grotesque, slapstick, satirical, ironic. None of them quite fits to the point of generality, though all may be found without looking too far. His characters take pratfalls at the most serious moments. Pathetic irony may invade the most comic scene. It is a rare and estimable quality to direct such a show successfully. Who else in this cockeyed universe could design a society thriving on the free-playing abilities of its leaders, with the delightful rule that a husband and wife team may undergo instant divorce at the end of a bad game? Or throw in a car that nags its owner for oil changes, tune-ups, and new tires? I see you've already guessed. The book is The Game Players of Titan, or a story which opens with a psychoanalyst diagnosing his patient as a typical paranoid for believing he is being followed, has his telephone tapped, and that everyone hates him. Until the analyst realizes who the man is, understands that he probably is under surveillance, and is suddenly overwhelmed with hatred for him. The patient is Dr. Bloodmoney, in the book of the same name, a kaleidoscopically brilliant piece of storytelling. 3 of my other personal favorites are Ubik, which Larry Ashmead at Doubleday thrust into my hands one afternoon with excitement and a smile, telling me I had to read it immediately. I began it on the train back to Baltimore that evening, and could have wound up in Cincinnati or Kansas City had it not been for a conductor who might have understudied Jerome Hines. Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep? A book I read at a more stationary single sitting, and whose title occasionally runs through my head to the tune of Greensleeves. I'm not certain why. The tune, I mean. The single sitting part becomes self-explanatory on opening the book. Galactic Popular. The encyclopedia defines a particular creature as the dominant life form on a certain planet, and it points out that the species only consists of one member. This one is almost whimsical, but not quite. A Philip Dick book can never be categorized that neatly. But this one is a bit special in the focusing of its humors, Elizabethan usage, and in the almost pastoral quality of certain sections. By mentioning these personal favorites, I do not intend to detract from his other works. I have read almost all of Philip Dick's stories, and I have never put down a single one with that feeling all readers know at some time or other, that a writer has cheated, has taken an easy way out, rather than addressing himself with his full abilities to the issues he has invoked. Philip Dick is an honest writer in this respect. Or if I am wrong and he does ever handle something in the other fashion, then it is a tribute to his artistry that he succeeds so well in concealing it. Inventiveness, wit, artistic integrity, three very good things to have. To say them, however, is perhaps to talk more about the mind behind the words than the ends to which they are addressed. For to say them in all good-intentioned honesty about a story results mainly in a heaping of abstractions. A story is a series of effects. I owned at the beginning that Philip Dick's effects fascinate me even more than the social discontents pulsing through the neon tube in front of the wrinkled mirror suspended by the piano wire from the windmill of his mind. He is a writer's writer, rich enough in fancy that he can afford to throw away in a paragraph ideas another writer might build a book upon. I cannot detail these effects, but then I could not have written a label for the Ubik can either. It is the variety and near surreal aptness of his juxtapositions which defend this matter too against facile categorization. The subjective response, however, when a Philip Dick book has been finished and put aside, is that, upon reflection, it does not seem so much that one holds the memory of a story. Rather, it is the after effects of a poem rich in metaphor that seem to remain. This I value, partly because it does defy a full mapping, but mainly because that which is left of a Philip Dick story when the details have been forgotten is a thing which comes to me at odd times and offers me a feeling or a thought. Therefore, a thing which leaves me richer for having known it. Do androids dream of electric sheep? Auckland. A turtle which explorer Captain Cook gave to the King of Tonga in 1777 died yesterday. It was nearly 200 years old. The animal, called Tuimavila, died at the royal palace ground in the Tongan capital of Nuku'alofa. The people of Tonga regarded the animal as a chief, and special keepers were appointed to look after it. It was blinded in a bushfire a few years ago. Tonga Radio said Tuimamila's carcass would be sent to the Auckland Museum in New Zealand. Reuters, 1966. 1. A merry little surge of electricity, piped by automatic alarm from the mood organ beside his bed, awakened surprised him to find himself awake without prior notice. He rose from the bed, stood up in his multicolored pajamas, and stretched. Now, in her bed, his wife Iran opened her gray, unmerry eyes, blinked, then groaned and shut her eyes again. You said your pen feel too weak, he said to her. I'll reset it and you'll be awake, and keep your hand off my settings. Her voice held bitter sharpness. I don't want to be awake. He seated himself beside her, bent over her, and explained softly, when you set the surge up high enough, you'll be glad you're awake. That's the whole point. At setting C, it overcomes the threshold barring consciousness, as it does for me. Friendlily, because he felt well-disposed toward the world, his setting had been a D. He patted her bare, pale shoulder. Get your crude cop's hand away, Iran said. I'm not a cop. He felt irritable now, although he hadn't dialed for it. You're worse, his wife said, her eyes still shut. You're a murderer hired by the cops. I've never killed a human being in my life. His irritability had risen now, and become outright hostility. Iran said, just those poor Andes. I notice you've never had any hesitation as to spending the bounty money I bring home on whatever momentarily attracts your attention. He rose, strode to the console of his mood organ. Instead of saving, he said, so we could buy a real sheep to replace that fake electric one upstairs. A mere electric animal and me earning all that I've worked my way up to through the years. At his console, he hesitated between dialing for a thalamic suppressant, which would abolish his mood of rage, or a thalamic stimulant, which would make him irked enough to win the argument. If you dial, Iran said, eyes open and watching, for greater venom, then I'll dial the same. I'll dial the maximum, and you'll see a fight that makes every argument we've had up to now seem like nothing. Dial and see, just try me. She rose swiftly, loped to the console of her own mood organ, stood glaring at him, waiting. He sighed, defeated by her threat. February 3rd, 2021, he saw that a businesslike professional attitude was called for. "If I dial by schedule," he said warily, "will you agree to also?" He waited, canny enough not to commit himself until his wife had agreed to follow suit. "My schedule for today lists a 6-hour self-accusatory depression," Iran said. "What? Why did you schedule that? It defeated the whole purpose of the mood organ." "I didn't even know you could set it for that," he said gloomily. "I was sitting here one afternoon," Iran said, "and naturally I had turned on Buster Friendly and his friendly friends, and he was talking about a big news item he's about to break. And then that awful commercial came on, the one I hate, you know, for mountebank lead cod pieces. And so for a minute I shut off the sound, and I heard the building, this building, I heard the..." She gestured. "Empty apartments," Rick said. Sometimes he heard them at night when he was supposed to be asleep. And yet, for this day and age, a one-half occupied, con-apt building rated high in the scheme of population density. Out in what had been before the war the suburbs, one could find buildings entirely empty, or so he had heard. He had let the information remain second-hand. Like most people, he did not care to experience it directly. "At that moment," Iran said, "when I had the TV sound off, I was in a 382 mood. I had just dialed it. So although I heard the emptiness intellectually, I didn't feel it. My first reaction consisted of being grateful that we could afford a Penfield mood organ. But then I realized how unhealthy it was, sensing the absence of life, not just in this building, but everywhere, and not reacting. You see? I guess you don't. But that used to be considered a sign of mental illness. They called it absence of appropriate affect. So I left the TV sound off, and I sat down at my mood organ, and I experimented. And I finally found a setting for despair." Her dark, hurt face showed satisfaction, as if she had achieved something of worth. "So I put it on my schedule for twice a month. I think that's a reasonable amount of time to feel hopeless about everything, about staying here on Earth after everybody who's smart has emigrated, don't you think?" "But a mood like that," Rick said, "you're apt to stay in it, not dial your way out. Despair like that about total reality is self-perpetuating." "I program an automatic resetting for 3 hours later," his wife said sleekly. "A 481. Awareness of manifold possibilities open to me in the future. You hope that..." "I know 481, he interrupted. He had dialed out the combination many times. He relied on it greatly. "Listen," he said, seating himself on his bed and taking hold of her hands to draw her down beside him. "Even with an automatic cutoff, it's dangerous to undergo a depression. Any kind. Forget what you've scheduled, and I'll forget what I've scheduled. We'll dial the 104 together, and both experience it. And then you stay in it while I reset mine for my usual business-like attitude. That way I'll want to hop up to the roof and check out the sheep, and then head for the office. Meanwhile, I'll know you're not sitting here brooding with no TV." He released her slim, long fingers, supported the spacious apartment to the living room, which smelled faintly of last night's cigarettes. There, he bent to turn on the TV. From the bedroom, Iran's voice came. "I can't stand TV before breakfast." "Dial 888, Rick said as the sat warmed. "The desire to watch TV no matter what's on it." "I don't feel like dialing anything at all now," Iran said. "Then dial 3, he said. "I can't dial a setting that stimulates my cerebral cortex into wanting to dial. If I which was his habitual innate approach without recourse to Penfield artificial brain stimulation. After a hurried breakfast, he had lost time due to the discussion with his wife. He ascended the flat for venturing out, including his Ajax model mountebank led codpiece, to the covered roof pasture, whereon his electric sheep grazed. Whereon it, sophisticated piece of hardware that it was, chomped away in simulated contentment, bamboozling the other tenants of the building. Of course, some of their animals undoubtedly consisted of electronic circuitry fakes too. He had, of course, never nosed into the matter, any more than they, his neighbors, had pried into the real workings of his sheep. Nothing could be more impolite. To say, "Is your sheep genuine?" would be a worse breach of manners than to inquire whether a citizen's teeth, hair, or internal organs would test out authentic. The morning air, spilling over with radioactive motes, gray and sun-beclouding, belched about him, haunting his nose. He sniffed involuntarily the taint of death. Well, that was too strong a description for it, he decided as he made his way to the particular plot of sod which he owned along with the unduly large apartment below. The legacy of World War terminus had diminished in potency. Those who could not survive the dust had passed into oblivion years ago, and the dust, weaker now and confronting the strong survivors, only deranged minds and dramatic properties. Despite his lead codpiece, the dust, undoubtedly, filtered in and at him, brought him daily, so long as he failed to emigrate, its little load of the foulest filth. So far, medical checkups taken monthly confirmed him as a regular, a man who could reproduce within the tolerances set by law. Any month, however, the exam by the San Francisco Police Department doctors could reveal otherwise. Continually, new specials came into existence, created out of regulars by the omnipresent dust. The same, currently blabbed by posters, TV ads, and government junk mail ran, "Emigrate or degenerate, the choice is yours." Very true, Rick thought as he opened the gate to his little pasture and approached his electric sheep. "But I can't emigrate," he said to himself, "because of my job." The owner of the adjoining pasture, his con-apt neighbor Bill Barber, hailed him. He, like Rick, had dressed for work, but had stopped off on the way to check his animal too. "My horse," Barber declared beamingly, "is pregnant." He indicated the big Percheron, which stood staring off in an empty fashion into space. "What do you say to that?" "I say pretty soon you'll have two horses," Rick said. He had reached his sheep now. It lay ruminating, its alert eyes fixed on him in case he had brought any rolled oats with him. The alleged sheep contained an oat tropic circuit. At the sight of such cereals, it would scramble up convincingly and amble over. "What's she pregnant by?" he asked Barber. "The wind?" "I bought some of the highest quality fertilizing plasma available in California," Barber informed him, "through inside contacts I have with the State Animal Husbandry Board. Don't you remember last week when their inspector was out here examining Judy? They're eager to have her foal. She's an unmatched superior." Barber thumped his horse fondly on the neck, and she inclined her head toward him. "Ever thought of selling your horse?" Rick asked. He wished to God he had a horse. In fact, any animal. Owning and maintaining a fraud had a way of gradually demoralizing one. And yet, from a social standpoint, it had to be done, given the absence of the real article. He had therefore no choice except to continue. Even were he not to care himself, there remained his wife, and Iran did care. Very much. Barber said, "It would be immoral to sell my horse." "Sell the colt, then. Having two animals is more immoral than not having any." Puzzled, Barber said, "How do you mean? A lot of people have two animals, even three, four, and like in the case of Fred Washburn, who owns the algae processing plant my brother works at, even five. Didn't you see that article about his duck in yesterday's Chronicle? It's supposed to be the heaviest, largest Muscovy on the West Coast." The man's eyes glazed over, imagining such possessions. He drifted by degrees into a trance. Exploring about in his coat pockets, Rick found his creased, much-studied copy of Sydney's Animal and Fowl Catalog, January supplement. He looked in the index, found colts, horses, offspring, and presently had the prevailing national price. I can buy a Percheron colt from Sydney's for $5,000, he said aloud. No, you can't, Barbara said. Look at the listing again. It's in italics. That means they don't have any in stock. But that would be the price if they did have. Suppose, Rick said, I pay you $500 a month for 10 months. Full catalog value. Pityingly, Barbara said, Deckard, you don't understand about horses. There's a reason why Sydney's doesn't have any Percheron colts in stock. Percheron colts just don't change hands. At catalog value even. They're too scarce, even relatively inferior ones. He leaned across their common fence, gesticulating. I've had Judy for 3 years, and not in all that time have I seen a Percheron mare of her quality. To acquire her, I had to fly to Canada, and I personally drove her back here myself to make sure she wasn't stolen. You bring an animal like this anywhere around Colorado or Wyoming, and they'll knock you off to get hold of it. You know why? Because back before WWT, there existed literally hundreds. But, Rick interrupted, for you to have 2 horses and me none, that violates the whole basic theological and moral structure of Mercerism. You have your sheep. Hell, you can follow the ascent in your individual life, and when you grasp the 2 handles of empathy, you approach honorably. Now, if you didn't have that old sheep there, I'd see some logic in your position. Sure, if I had 2 animals and you didn't have any, I'd be helping deprive you of true fusion with Mercer. But every family in this building, let's see, around 50, 1 to every 3 apps as I compute it. Every one of us has an animal of some sort. Graveson has that chicken over there. He gestured north. Oakes and his wife have that big red dog that barks in the night. He pondered. I think Ed Smith has a cat down in his app. At least he says so, but no one's ever seen it. Possibly he's just pretending. Going over to his sheep, Rick bent down, searching in the thick white wool. The fleece at least was genuine, until he found what he was looking for, the concealed control panel of the mechanism. As Barbara watched, he snapped open the panel covering, revealing it. See, he said to Barbara, you understand now why I want your colt so badly? After an interval, Barbara said, you poor guy. Has it always been this way? No, Rick said, once again closing the panel covering of his electric sheep. He straightened up, turned, and faced his neighbor. I had a real sheep originally. My wife's father gave it to us outright when he emigrated. Then about a year ago, remember that time I took it to the vet? You were up here that morning when I came out and found it lying on its side and it couldn't get up. You got it to its feet, Barbara said, remembering and nodding. Yeah, you managed to lift it up, but then after a minute or 2 of walking around, it fell over again. Rick said, sheep get strange diseases. Or put another way, sheep get a lot of diseases, but the symptoms are always the same. The sheep can't get up, and there's no way to tell how serious it is, whether it's a sprained leg or the animal's dying of tetanus. That's what mine died of. Tetanus. Up here? Barbara said. On the roof? Yeah, hey, Rick explained. At one time, I didn't get all the wire off the bale. I left the piece, and Groucho, that's what I called him, got a scratch, and in that way, contracted tetanus. I took him to the vets, and he died. And I thought about it, and finally I called one of those shops that manufacture artificial animals, and I showed them a photograph of Groucho. They made this. He indicated the reclining ersatz animal, which continued to ruminate attentively, still watching alertly for any indication of oats. It's a premium job, but I'd put as much time and attention into accounting for it as I did when it was real. But he shrugged. It's not the same, Barbara finished. But almost. You feel the same doing it. You have to keep your eye on it exactly as you did when it was really alive, because they break down and then everyone in the building knows. Repair shop 6 times, mostly little malfunctions. If anyone saw them, for instance, one time the voice tape broke, or anyhow got fouled and it wouldn't stop buying, they'd recognize it as a mechanical breakdown. He added, the repair outfit's truck is of course marked Animal Hospital something, and the driver dresses like a vet, completely in white. He glanced suddenly at his watch, remembering the time. I have to get to work, he said to Barbara. anybody here in the building? Pausing, Rick started to say thanks, but then something of the despair that Iran had been talking about tapped him on the shoulder, and he said, I don't know, maybe it doesn't make any difference. But they'll look down on you. Not all of them, but some. You know how people are about not taking care of an animal. They consider it immoral and anti-empathic. I mean, technically it's not a crime like it was right after WWT, but the feeling's still there. God, Rick said futilely, and gestured empty-handed. I want to have an animal. I keep trying to buy one, but on my salary, on what a city employee makes, if he thought I could get lucky in my work again, as I did 2 years ago when I managed to bag 4 Andes during 1 month. If I had known then, he thought, that Groucho was going to die, but that had been before the tetanus, before the 2-inch piece of broken hypodermic like baling wire. You could buy a cat, Barbara offered. Cats are cheap. Look in your Sydney's catalog. Rick said quietly, I don't want a domestic pet. I want what I originally had, a large animal, a sheep, or if I can get the money, a cow or a steer, or what you have, a horse. The bounty from retiring 5 Andes would do it, he realized. $1,000 apiece, over and above my salary. And somewhere I could find from someone what I want. Even if the listing in Sydney's Animal and Fowl is in italics. $5,000. But he thought the 5 Andes first have to make their way to Earth from one of the colony planets. I can't control that. I can't make 5 of them come here, and even if I could, there are other bounty hunters with other police agencies throughout the world. The Andes would specifically have to take up residence in Northern California, and the senior bounty hunter in this area, Dave Holden, would have to die or retire. Buy a cricket, Barbara suggested wittily, or a mouse. Hey, for $25 you can buy a full-grown mouse. Rick said, the horse could die, like Groucho died, without warning. When you get home from work this evening, you could find her laid out on her back, her feet in the air like a bug, like what you said, a cricket. He strode off, coffee in his hand. Sorry if I offended you, Barbara said nervously. In silence, Rick Deckard plucked open the door of his hover car. He had nothing further to say to his neighbor. His mind was on his work, on the day ahead. 2. In a giant, empty, decaying building which had once housed thousands, a single TV set hawked its wares to an uninhabited room. This ownerless ruin had, before World War terminus, been tended and maintained. Here had been the suburbs of San Francisco, a short ride by monorail rapid transit. The entire peninsula had chattered like a bird tree with life and opinions and complaints. And now the watchful owners had either died or migrated to a colony world. Mostly the former. It had been a costly war despite the valiant predictions of the Pentagon and its smug scientific vassal, the Rand Corporation, which had in fact existed not far from this spot. Like the apartment owners, the corporation had departed, evidently for good. No one missed it. In addition, no one today remembered why the war had come about, or who, if anyone, had won. The dust, which had contaminated most of the planet's surface, had originated in no country, and no one, even the wartime enemy, had planned on it. First, strangely, the owls had died. At the time, it had seemed almost funny. The fat, fluffy white birds lying here and there, in yards and on streets. Coming out no earlier than twilight, as they had while alive, the owls escaped notice. Medieval plagues had manifested themselves in a similar way, in the form of many dead rats. This plague, however, had descended from above. After the owls, of course, the other birds followed, but by then the mystery had been grasped and understood. A meager colonization program had been underway before the war, but now that the sun had ceased to shine on Earth, the colonization entered an entirely new phase. In connection with this, a weapon of war, the synthetic freedom fighter, had been modified, able to function on an alien world. The humanoid robot, strictly speaking the organic android, had become the mobile donkey engine of the colonization program. Under UN law, each emigrant automatically received possession of an android subtype of his choice, and by 2019, The variety of subtypes passed all understanding in the manner of American automobiles of the 1960s. That had been the ultimate incentive of emigration. The android served as talent. The radioactive fallout has stayed. The UN had made it easy to emigrate. Difficult, if not impossible, to stay. Loitering on Earth potentially meant finding oneself abruptly classed as biologically unacceptable, a menace to the pristine heredity of the race. Citizen, even if accepting sterilization, dropped out of history. He ceased, in fact, to be part of mankind. And yet persons here and there declined to migrate. That, even to those involved, constituted a perplexing irrationality. Logically, every regular should have emigrated already. Perhaps, deformed as it was, Earth remained familiar, to be clung to. Or possibly the non-emigrant imagined that the tint of dust would deplete itself finally. Thousands of individuals remained, most of them concentrated in urban areas where they could physically see one another, take part in their mutual presence. Those appeared to be the relatively sane ones, and, in dubious addition to them, occasional peculiar entities remained in the virtually abandoned suburbs. John Isidore, being hammered at by the television set in his living room as he shaved in the bathroom, was one of these. He simply had wandered to this spot in the early days following the war. In those evil times, no one had known really what they were doing. Populations, detached by the war, had roamed, squatted temporarily at first one region and then another. Back then the fallout had been sporadic and highly variable. Some states had been nearly free of it, others became saturated. Displaced populations moved as the dust moved. The peninsula south of San Francisco had been first dust-free, and a great body of persons had responded by taking up residence there. When the dust arrived, some had died and the rest had departed. J.R. Isidore remained. The TV set shouted, "Duplicates the halcyon days of the pre-Civil War southern states. Either as body servants or tireless field hands, the custom-tailored humanoid robot, designed specifically for your unique needs, for you and you alone, given to you on your arrival absolutely free, equipped fully, as specified by you before your departure from Earth. This loyal, trouble-free companion in the greatest, boldest adventure contrived by man in modern history will provide..." It continued on and on. "I wonder if I'm late for work," Isidore wondered as he scraped. He did not own a working clock. Generally, he depended on the TV for time signals. But today was Interspace Horizons Day, evidently. Anyhow, the TV claimed this to be the 5th or 6th anniversary of the founding of New America, the chief U.S. settlement on Mars. And his TV set, being partly broken, picked up only the channel which had been nationalized during the war and still remained so. The government in Washington, with its colonization program, constituted the sole sponsor which Isidore found himself forced to listen to. "Let's hear from Mrs. Maggie Klugman," the TV announcer suggested to John Isidore, who wanted only to know the time. A recent immigrant to Mars, Mrs. Klugman, in an interview taped live in New York, had this to say: "Mrs. Klugman, how would you contrast your life back on contaminated Earth with your new life here in a world rich with every imaginable possibility?" A pause, and then a tired, dry, middle-aged female voice said, "I think what I and my family of 3 noticed most was the dignity." "The dignity, Mrs. Klugman?" the announcer asked. "Yes," Mrs. Klugman, now of New York, Mars, said. "It's a hard thing to explain, having a servant you can depend on in these troubled times. I find it reassuring." Back on Earth, Mrs. Klugman, in the old days, did you also worry about finding yourself classified, as a special? "Oh, my husband and myself worried ourselves nearly to death. Of course, once we emigrated, that worry vanished. Fortunately, forever." To himself, John Isidore thought acidly, "And it's gone away from me, too, without my having to emigrate." He had been a special now for over a year, and not merely in regard to the distorted genes which he carried. Worse still, he had failed to pass the minimum mental faculties test, which made him, in popular parlance, a chickenhead. Upon him, the contempt of 3 planets descended. However, despite this, he survived. He had his job, driving including a pickup and delivery truck for a false animal repair firm, the Van Ness Pet Hospital, and his gloomy Gothic boss, Hannibal Sloat, accepted him as human, and this he appreciated. Mors certa, vita incerta, as Mr. Sloat occasionally declared. Isidore, although he had heard the expression a number of times, retained only a dim notion as to its meaning. After all, if a chicken head could fathom Latin, it would cease to be a chicken head. Mr. Sloat, when this was pointed out to him, acknowledged its truth. And there existed chicken heads infinitely stupider than Isidore, who could hold no jobs at all, who remained in custodial institutions quaintly called Institute of Special Trade Skills of America, the word special having to get in there somehow, as always. Your husband felt no protection, the TV announcer was saying, in owning and continually wearing an expensive and clumsy radiation-proof lead codpiece, Mrs. Klugman? My husband, Mrs. Klugman began, but at that point, having finished shaving, Isidore strode into the living room and shut off the TV set. Silence. It flashed from the woodwork and the walls, and smoking with an awful total power as if generated by a vast mill. It rose from the floor, up out of the tattered gray wall-to-wall carpeting. It unleashed itself on the broken and semi-broken appliances in the kitchen, dead machines which hadn't worked in all the time Isidore had lived here. From the useless pole lamp in the living room, it oozed out, meshing with the empty and wordless descent of itself from the fly-specked ceiling. It managed, in fact, to emerge from every object within his range of vision, as if it, the silence, meant to supplant all things tangible. Hence it assailed not only his ears, but his eyes. As he stood by the inert TV set, he experienced the silence as visible, and in its own way alive. Alive. He had often felt its austere approach before, when it came that burst in without subtlety, evidently unable to wait. The silence of the world could not rein back its greed. Not any longer. Not when it had virtually won. He wondered then if the others who had remained on Earth experienced the void this way, or was it peculiar to his peculiar biological identity, a freak generated by his inept sensory apparatus. Interesting question, Isidore thought. But whom could he compare notes with? He lived alone in this deteriorating blind building of 1,000 uninhabited apartments, which, like all its counterparts, fell day by day into greater entropic ruin. Eventually, everything within the building would merge, would be faceless and identical, mere pudding-like kipple piled to the ceiling of each apartment. And after that, the uncared-for building itself would settle into shapelessness, buried under the ubiquity of the dust. By then, naturally, he himself would be dead. Another interesting event to anticipate as he stood here in his stricken living room, alone with the lungless, all-penetrating, masterful world silence. Better perhaps to turn the TV back on. But the ads, directed at the remaining regulars, frightened him. They informed him in a countless procession of ways that he, a special, wasn't wanted, had no use, could not, even if he wanted to, emigrate. So why listen to that, he asked himself irritably. Thwart them and their colonization. I hope a war gets started there. After all, it theoretically could, and they wind up like Earth, and everybody who emigrated turns out to be special. Okay, he thought, I'm off to work. He reached for the doorknob that opened the way out into the unlit hall, then shrank back as he glimpsed the vacuity of the rest of the building. It lay in wait for him, out here, the force which he had felt busily penetrating his specific apartment. God, he thought, and re-shut the door. He was not ready for the trip up those clanging stairs to the empty roof where he had no animal. The echo of himself ascending, the echo of nothing. Time to grasp the handles, he said to himself, and crossed the living room to the black empathy box. When he turned it on, the usual faint smell of negative ions surged from the power supply. He breathed in eagerly, already buoyed up. Then the cathode ray tube glowed like an imitation feeble TV image, a collage formed, made of apparently random colors, trails, and configurations, which, until the handles were grasped, amounted to nothing. So, taking a deep breath to steady himself, he grasped the twin handles. The visual image congealed. He saw at once landscape, the old brown barren ascent with tufts of dried-out bone-like weeds poking slantedly into a dim and sunless sky. One single figure, more or less human in form, toiled its way up the hillside, an elderly man wearing a dull, featureless robe, covering as meager as if it had been snatched from the hostile emptiness of the sky. The man, Wilbur Mercer, plodded ahead, and as he clutched the handles, John Isidore gradually experienced a waning of the living room in which he stood. The dilapidated furniture and walls ebbed out, and he ceased to experience them at all. He found himself instead, as always before, entering into the landscape of drab hill, drab sky, and at the same time he no longer witnessed the climb of the elderly man. His own feet now scraped, sought purchase among the familiar loose stones. He felt the same old painful, irregular roughness beneath his feet, and once again smelled the acrid haze of the sky. Not Earth's sky, but that of some place alien, distant, and yet by means of the empathy box, instantly available. He had crossed over in the usual perplexing fashion. Physical merging, accompanied by mental and spiritual identification, with Wilbur Mercer had reoccurred, as it did for everyone who at this moment clutched the handles, either here on Earth or on one of the colony planets. He experienced them, the others, incorporated the babble of their thoughts, heard in his own brain the noise of their many individual existences. They, and he, cared about one thing. This fusion of their mentalities oriented their attention on the hill, the climb, the need to ascend. Step by step it evolved, so slowly as to be nearly imperceptible, but it was there. Higher, he thought, as stones rattled downward under his feet. Today we are higher than yesterday, and tomorrow, he, the compound figure of Wilbur Mercer, glanced up to view the ascent ahead. Impossible to make out the end. Too far. But it would come. A rock, hurled at him, struck his arm. He felt the pain. He half turned, and another rock sailed past him, missing him. It collided with the earth, and the sound startled him. He wondered, fearing to see his tormentor. The old antagonists, manifesting themselves at the periphery of his vision. If, or they, had followed him all the way up the hill, they would remain until at the top. Remember the top, the sudden leveling of the hill, when the climb ceased and the other part of it began. How many times had he done this? The several times blurred, future and past blurred. What he had already experienced and what he would eventually experience blended so that nothing remained but the moment, the standing still and resting during which he rubbed the cut on his arm which the stone had left. God, he thought in weariness, in what way is this fair? Why am I up here alone like this, being tormented by something I can't even see? And then, within him, the mutual babble of everyone else in fusion broke the illusion of aloneness. You felt it too, he thought. Yes, the voices answered. We got hit on the left arm. It hurts like hell. Okay, he said. We better get started moving again. He resumed walking, and all of them accompanied him immediately. Once, he remembered, it had been different. Back before the curse had come, an earlier, happier part of life. They, his foster parents, Frank and Cora Mercer, had found him floating on an inflated rubber air rescue raft off the coast of New England. Or had it been Mexico, near the port of Tampico? He did not now remember the circumstances. Childhood had been nice. He had loved all life, especially the animals, had in fact been able for a time to bring dead animals back as they had been. He lived with rabbits and bugs, wherever it was, either on Earth or a colony world. Now he had forgotten that too. But he recalled the killers, as they had arrested him as a freak, more special than any of the other specials. And due to that, everything had changed. Local law prohibited the time reversal faculty by which the dead returned to life. They had spelled it out to him during his 16th year. He continued for another year to do it secretly, in the still remaining woods. An old woman whom he had never seen or heard of had told. Without his parents' consent, they, the killers, had bombarded the unique nodule which had formed in his brain, had attacked it with radioactive cobalt, and this had plunged him into a different world, one whose existence he had never suspected. It had been a pit of corpses and dead bones, and he had struggled for years to get up from it. The donkey, and especially the toad, the creatures most important to him, had vanished, had become extinct. Only rotting fragments, an eyeless head here, part of a hand there, remained. At last, a bird which had come there to die told him where he was. He had sunk down into the tomb world. He could not get out until the bones strewn around him grew back into living creatures. He had become joined to the metabolism of other lives, and until they rose, he could not rise either. How long that part of the cycle had lasted, he did not now know. Nothing had happened, generally, so it had been measureless. But at last the bones had regained flesh. The empty eye pits had filled up, and the new eyes had seen, while meantime the restored beaks and mouths had cackled, barked, and caterwauled. Possibly he had done it. Perhaps the extrasensory note of his brain had finally grown back. Or maybe he hadn't accomplished it. Very likely it could have been a natural process. Anyhow, he was no longer sinking. He had begun to ascend, along with the others. Long ago he had lost sight of them. He found himself evidently climbing alone, but they were there. They still accompanied him. He felt them strangely inside him. Isidore stood holding the two handles, experiencing himself as encompassing every other living thing. And then, reluctantly, he let go. It had to end, as always, and anyhow his arm ached and bled where the rock had struck it. Releasing the handles, he examined his arm, then made his way unsteadily to the bathroom of his apartment to wash the cut off. This was not the first wound he had received while in fusion with Mercer, and it probably would not be the last. People, especially elderly ones, had died, particularly later on at the top of the hill when the torment began in earnest. I wonder if I can go through that part again, he said to himself as he swabbed the injury. Chance of cardiac arrest. Be better, he reflected, if I lived in town where those buildings have a doctor standing by with those electrospark machines. Here, alone in this place, it's too risky. But he knew he'd take the risk. He always had before. As did most people, even oldsters who were physically fragile. Using a Kleenex, he dried his damaged arm. And heard, muffled and far off, a TV set. It's someone else in this building, he thought wildly, unable to believe it. Not my TV, that's off. And I can feel the floor resonance. It's below, on another level entirely. I'm not alone here anymore, he realized. Another resident has moved in, taken one of the abandoned apartments, and close enough for me to hear him. Must be level 2 or level 3, certainly no deeper. Let's see, he thought rapidly. What do you do when a new resident moves in? Drop by and borrow something. Is that how it's done? He could not remember. This had never happened to him before, here or anywhere else. People moved out, people emigrated, but nobody ever moved in. You take them something, he decided. Like a cup of water, or rather milk. Yes, it's milk or flour or maybe an egg. Or specifically their Airzoc substitutes. Looking in his refrigerator, the compressor had long since ceased working, he found a dubious cube of margarine. And with it, set off excitedly, his heart laboring for the level below. I have to keep calm, he realized. Not let him know I'm a chickenhead. If he finds out I'm a chickenhead, he won't talk to me. That's always the way it is for some reason. I wonder why. He hurried down the hall. 3. On his way to work, Rick Deckard, as Lord knew how many other people, stopped briefly to skulk about in front of one of San Francisco's larger pet shops along Animal Row. In the center of the block-long display window, an ostrich, in a heated, clear plastic cage, returned his stare. The bird, according to the info plaque attached to the cage, had just arrived from a zoo in Cleveland. It was the only ostrich on the West Coast. After staring at it, Rick spent a few more minutes staring grimly at the price tag. He then continued on to the Hall of Justice on Lombard Street and found himself a quarter of an hour late to work. As he unlocked his office door, his superior, Police Inspector Harry Bryant, jug-eared and red-headed, sloppily dressed but wise-eyed and conscious of nearly everything of any importance, hailed him. Meet me at 9:30 in Dave Holden's office. Inspector Bryant, as he spoke, flicked briefly through a clipboard of onion skin-type sheets. Holden, he continued as he started off, is in Mount Zion Hospital with a laser track through his spine. He'll be there for a month at least. until they can get one of those new organic plastic spinal sections to take hold. What happened? Rick asked, chilled. The department's chief bounty hunter had been all right yesterday. At the end of the day, he had, as usual, zipped off in his hover car to his apartment in the crowded high-prestige Nob Hill area of the city. Bryant muttered over his shoulder something about 9:30 in Dave's office and departed, leaving Rick standing alone. As he entered his own office, Rick heard the voice of his secretary, Ann Marston, behind him. "Mr. Deckard, you know what happened to Mr. Holden? He got shot." She followed after him into the stuffy, closed-up office and set the air filtering unit into motion. "Yeah," he responded absently. "It must have been one of those new, extra-clever Andys the Rosen Association is turning out," Miss Marston said. "Did you read over the company's brochure and the spec sheets? The Nexus 6 brain unit they're using now is capable of selecting within a field of 2 trillion constituents, or 10 million separate neural pathways." She lowered her voice. "You missed the vid call this morning. Miss Wild told me it came through the switchboard exactly at 9. "A call in?" Rick asked. Miss Marston said, "A call out by Mr. Bryant to the WPO in Russia, asking them if they would be willing to file a formal written complaint with the Rosen Association's factory representative east. Harry still wants the Nexus 6 brain unit withdrawn from the market." He felt no surprise. Since the initial release of its specifications and performance charts back in August of 2020, most police agencies which dealt with escaped Andys had been protesting. "The Soviet police can't do any more than we can," he said. Legally, the manufacturers of the Nexus 6 brain unit operated under colonial law, their parent auto factory being on Mars. "We had better just accept the new unit as a fact of life," he said. "It's always been this way, with every improved brain unit that's come along. I remember the howls of pain when the Suderman people showed up with their old T-14 back in 18. Every police agency in the Western Hemisphere clamored that no test would detect its presence in an instance of illegal entry here. As a matter of fact, for a while they were right. Over 50 of the T-14 android, as he recalled, had made their way by one means or another to Earth, and had not been detected for a period, in some cases up to an entire year. But then the Voight empathy test had been devised by the Pavlov Institute working in the Soviet Union, and no T-14 android, insofar at least as was known, had managed to pass that particular test. "Want to know what the Russian police said?" Miss Marston asked. "I know that too." Her freckled orange face glowed. Rick said, "I'll find out from Harry Bryant." He felt irritable. Office gossip annoyed him because it always proved better than the truth. Seating himself at his desk, he pointedly fished about in a drawer until Miss Marston, receiving the hint, departed. From the drawer, he produced an ancient creased manila envelope. Leaning back, tilting his important style chair, he rummaged among the contents of the envelope until he came across what he wanted: the collected extant data on the Nexus 6. A moment's reading vindicated Miss Marston's statement. The Nexus 6 did have 2 trillion constituents plus a choice within a range of 10 million possible combinations of cerebral activity. In 0.45 of a second, an android equipped with such a brain structure could assume any one of 14 basic reaction postures. Well, no intelligence test could trap such an Andy. But then intelligence tests hadn't trapped an Andy in years, not since the primordial crude varieties of the 1970s. The Nexus 6 android types, Rick reflected, surpassed several classes of human specials in terms of intelligence. In other words, androids equipped with the new Nexus 6 brain unit had, from a sort of rough, pragmatic, no-nonsense standpoint, evolved beyond a major, but inferior, segment of mankind, for better or worse. The servant had, in some cases, become more adroit than its master. But new scales of achievement, for example the Voight empathy test, had emerged as criteria by which to judge. An android, no matter how gifted as to pure intellectual capacity, could make no sense out of the fusion which took place routinely among the followers of Mercerism, an experience which he, and virtually everyone else, including subnormal chickenheads, managed with no difficulty. He had wondered, as had most people at one time or another, precisely why an android bounced helplessly about when confronted by an empathy measuring test. Empathy evidently existed only within the human community, whereas intelligence exceptions to some degree could be found throughout every phylum and order, including the arachnida. For one thing, the empathic faculty probably required an unimpaired group instinct. A solitary organism, such as a spider, would have no use for it. In fact, it would tend to abort a spider's ability to survive. It would make him conscious of the desire to live on the part of his prey. Hence, all predators, even highly developed mammals such as cats, would starve. Empathy, he once had decided, must be limited to herbivores or anyhow omnivores who could depart from a meat diet. Because ultimately, the empathic gift blurred the boundaries between hunter and victim, between the successful and the defeated. As in the fusion with Mercer, everyone ascended together, or when the cycle had come to an end, fell together into the trough of the tomb world. Oddly, it resembled a sort of biological insurance, but double-edged. As long as some creature experienced joy, then the condition for all other creatures included a fragment of joy. However, if any living being suffered, then for all the rest the shadow could not be entirely cast off. A herd animal such as man would acquire a higher survival factor through this. An owl or a cobra would be destroyed. Evidently, the humanoid robot constituted a solitary predator. Rick liked to think of them that way. It made his job palatable. In retiring, i.e. killing and Andy, he did not violate the rule of life laid down by Mercer. He shall kill only the killers, Mercer had told them the year empathy boxes first appeared on Earth. And in Mercerism, as it evolved into a full theology, the concept of the killers had grown insidiously. In Mercerism, an absolute evil plucked at the threadbare cloak of the tottering, ascending old man, but it was never clear who or what this evil presence was. The Mercerite sensed evil without understanding it. Put another way, a Mercerite was free to locate the nebulous presence of the killers wherever he saw fit. For Rick Deckard, an escaped humanoid robot, which had killed its master, which had been equipped with an intelligence greater than that of many human beings, which had no regard for animals, which possessed no ability to feel empathic joy for another life form's success or grief at its defeat. That, for him, epitomized the killers. Thinking about animals reminded him of the ostrich he had seen in the pet store. Temporarily, he pushed away the specs on the Nexus 6 brain unit, took a pinch of Mrs. Siddon's number 3 and 4 snuff, and cogitated. Then he examined his watch, saw that he had time. He picked up his desk vid phone and said to Miss Marston, "Get me the Happy Dog Pet Shop on Sutter Street." "Yes, sir," Miss Marston said, and opened her phone book. "They can't really want that much for the ostrich," Rick said to himself. "They expect you to car trade like in the old days." "Happy Dog Pet Shop," a man's voice declared, and on Rick's vid screen, a minute happy face appeared. Animals could be heard bawling. "That ostrich you have in your display window," Rick said. He toyed with a ceramic ashtray before him on the desk. "What sort of a down payment would I need for that?" "Let's see," the animal salesman said, groping for a pen and pad of paper. "1/3 down," he figured. "May I ask, sir, if you're going to trade something in?" Guardedly, Rick said, "I haven't decided." "Let's say we put the ostrich on a 30-month contract," the salesman said, "at a low interest rate of 6% a month. That would make your monthly payment after a reasonable down." "You'll have to lower the price you're asking," Rick said. "Knock off 2,000 and I won't trade anything in. I'll come up with cash." Dave Holden, he reflected, is out of action. That could mean a great deal, depending on how many assignments show up during the coming month. "Sir," the animal salesman said, "our asking price is already $1,000 under book. Check your Sydneys." "I'll hang on. I want you to see for yourself, sir, that our price is fair." Christ, Rick thought. He was standing firm. However, just for the heck of it, he wiggled his bent Sydneys out of his coat pocket, thumbed to ostrich, male, female, old, young, sick, well, mint, used, and inspected the prices. "Mint, male, young, well," the salesman informed him. $30,000. He, too, had his Sydneys out. "We're exactly 1,000 under book. Now, your down payment—" "I'll think it over," Rick said, "and call you back." He started to hang up. "Your name, sir?" the salesman asked alertly. Frank Merriwell, Rick said. And your address, Mr. Merriwell, in case I'm not here when you call back. He made up an address and put the VIC phone receiver back on his cradle. All that money he thought, and yet people buy them. Some people have that kind of money. Picking up the receiver again, he said harshly, "Give me an outside line, Miss Marston, and don't listen in on the conversation, it's confidential." He glared at her. "Yes, sir," Miss Marston said. "Go ahead and dial." She then cut herself out of the circuit, leaving him to face the outside world. He dialed, by memory, the number of the Paul's Animal Shop at which he had gotten his air-top sheet. On the small vid screen, a man dressed like a vet appeared. "Dr. McRae," the man declared. "This is Deckard. How much is an electric off switch?" "Oh, I'd say we can fix you up for less than $800. How soon did you want delivery? We would have to make it up for you. There's not that much call, but I'll talk to you later." Rick interrupted. Glancing at his watch, he saw that 9:30 had arrived. "Goodbye." He hurriedly hung up and rose, and shortly thereafter stood before Inspector Bryant's office door. He passed by Bryant's receptionist, a captive with waist-length braided silver hair, and then the inspector's secretary, an ancient monster from the Jurassic swamp, frozen and sly, like some archaic apparition fixated in a tomb world. Neither woman spoke to him nor he to them. Opening the inner door, he nodded to his superior, who was busy on the phone. Seating himself, he got out the stacks on Nexus 6, which he had brought with him, and once more read them over as Inspector Bryant walked away. He felt depressed. And yet, logically, because of Dave's sudden disappearance from the work scene, he should be at least guardedly pleased. 4. Maybe I'm worried, Rick Deckard conjectured, that what happened to Dave will happen to me. And Andy, smart enough to label him, could probably take me too. That didn't seem to be it. "I see you brought the poop sheet on that new brain unit," Inspector Bryant said, hanging up the big phone. Rick said, "Yeah, I heard about it on the grapevine. How many Andys are involved, and how far did Dave get?" "8 to start with," Bryant said, consulting his clipboard. "Dave got the first 2. And the remaining 6 are here in Northern California. As far as we know, Dave thinks so. That was him I was talking to. I have his note, right in his desk. He says all he knows is here." Bryant passed a bundle of notepaper. So far, he did not seem inclined to pass the notes on to Rick. For some reason, he continued to leaf through them himself, frowning and working his tongue in and around the fringes of his mouth. "I have nothing on my agenda," Rick offered. "I'm ready to take over in Dave's place." Bryant said thoughtfully, "Dave used the Voight-Kampff altered scale in testing out the individuals he suspected. You realize, you ought to anyhow, this test isn't specific for the new brain units. No test is. The Voight scale, altered 3 years ago by Kampff, is all we have." He paused, pondering. "Dave considered it accurate. Maybe it is. But I would suggest this before you take out after these 6. Again, he tapped the pile of notes. "Fly to Seattle and talk with the Rosen people. Have them supply you a representative sampling of types employing the new Nexus 6 unit. And put them through the Voight-Kampff," Rick said. "It sounds so easy," Bryant said, half to himself. "Pardon?" Bryant said, "I think I'll talk to the Rosen organization myself while you're on your way." He eyed Rick then silently. Finally, he grunted, gnawed on a fingernail, and eventually decided on what he wanted to say. "I'm going to discuss with them the possibility of including several humans, as well as the new androids. But you won't know. It'll be my decision, in conjunction with the manufacturers. It should be set up by the time we get there." He abruptly pointed at Rick, his face severe. "This is the first time you'll be acting as senior bounty hunter. Dave knows a lot. He's got years of experience behind him." "So have I," Rick said tensely. "You've handled assignments devolving to you from Dave's schedule. He's always decided exactly which ones to turn over to you and which not to. But now you've got 6 that he intended to retire himself, one of which managed to get him first. This one." Bryant turned the notes around so that Rick could see. "That's well enough," Bryant said. "That's what it calls itself anyhow, assuming Dave is right. Everything is based on that assumption. the two Dave retired and then Polikoff. It was while Dave was administering the test. That's when Polikoff lasered him. Which proves that Dave was right, Rick said. Otherwise, he would not have been lasered. Polikoff would have no motive. You get started for Seattle, Bryant said. Don't tell them first. Listen. He rose to his feet, soberly confronted Rick. When you run the Voight-Kampff scale like that, if one of the humans fails to pass it, that can't happen, Rick said. One day a few weeks ago I talked to Dave about exactly that. He had been thinking along the same lines. I had a memo from the Soviet police, WPO itself, circulated throughout Earth, plus the colonies. A group of psychiatrists in Leningrad have approached WPO with the following proposition. They want the latest and most accurate personality profile analytical tools used in determining the presence of an android, in other words, the Voight-Kampff scale, applied to a carefully selected group of schizoid and schizophrenic human patients, those specifically which reveal what's called a flattening of affect. You've heard of that. Rick said, that's specifically what the scale measures. Then you understand what they're worried about. This problem has always existed, since we first encountered androids posing as humans. The consensus of police opinion is known to you in Lurie Kampff's article written 8 years ago, Role-Taking Blockage in the Undeteriorated Schizophrenic. Kampff compared the diminished empathic faculty found in human mental patients and a superficially similar but basically... The Leningrad psychiatrists, Bryant broke in brusquely, think that a small class of human beings could not pass the Voight-Kampff scale. If you tested them in line with police work, you'd assess them as humanoid robots. You'd be wrong, but by then they'd be dead. He was silent now, waiting for Rick's answer. But these individuals, Rick said, they'd be in institutions, Bryant agreed. They couldn't conceivably function in the outside world. They certainly couldn't go undetected as advanced psychotics, unless of course their breakdown had come recently and suddenly, and no one had gotten around to noticing. But this could happen. 1,000,000 to 1 odds, Rick said. But he saw the point. What worried Dave, Bryant continued, is this appearance of the new Nexus 6 advanced type. The Rosen organization assured us, as you know, that a Nexus 6 could be delineated by standard profile tests. We took their word for it. Now we're forced, as we knew we would be, to determine it on our own. That's what you'll be doing in Seattle. You understand, don't you, that this could go wrong either way. If you can't pick out all the humanoid robots, then we have no reliable analytical tool, and we'll never find the ones we're already escaping. If your scale factors out a human subject, identifies him as android... Bryant beamed at him icily. It would be awkward, although no one, absolutely not the Rosen people, will make the news public. Actually, we'll be able to sit on it indefinitely, although of course we'll have to inform WPO, and they in turn will notify Leningrad. Eventually it'll pop out of the papes at us, but by then we may have developed a better scale. He picked the phone up. You want to get started? Use an apartment car and fuel yourself at our pumps. Standing, Rick said, can I take Dave Holden's notes with me? I want to read them along the way. Bryant said, let's wait until you've tried out your scale in Seattle. His tone was interestingly merciless, and Rick Deckard noted it. When he landed the police department hover car on the roof of the Rosen Association building in Seattle, he found a young woman waiting for him. Black-haired and slender, wearing the new, huge dust-filtering glasses, she approached his car, her hands deep in the pockets of her brightly striped long coat. She had, on her sharply defined small face, an expression of sullen distaste. What's the matter? Rick said as he stepped from the parked car. The girl said obliquely, oh, I don't know. Something about the way we got talked to on the phone. It doesn't matter. Abruptly, she held out her hand. He reflexively took it. I'm Rachel Rosen. I guess you're Mr. Deckard. This is not my idea, he said. Yes, Inspector Bryant told us that. But you're officially the San Francisco Police Department, and it doesn't believe our unit is to the public benefit. She eyed him from beneath long black lashes, probably artificial. Rick said, a humanoid robot is like any other machine that can fluctuate between being a benefit and a hazard very rapidly. As a benefit, it's not our problem. But as a hazard, Rachel Rosen said, then you come in. Is it true, Mr. Deckard, that you're a bounty hunter? He shrugged, with reluctance, nodded. You have no difficulty viewing an android as inert, the girl said, so you can retire it, as they say. Do you have the group selected out for me? He said. I'd like to. He broke off, because all at once he had seen their animals. A powerful corporation, he realized, would of course be able to afford this. In the back of his mind, evidently, he had anticipated such a collection. It was not surprise that he felt, but more a sort of yearning. He quietly walked away from the girl toward the closest pen. Already he could smell them. The subtle scents of the creatures standing or sitting, or in the case of what appeared to be a raccoon, asleep. Never in his life had he personally seen a raccoon. He knew the animal only from 3D films shown on television. For some reason, the dust had struck that species almost as hard as it had the birds, of which almost none survived now. In an automatic response, he brought out his much-thumbed Sydney's and looked up raccoon with all the sub-listings. The list prices naturally appeared in italics. Like Percheron horses, none existed on the market for sale at any figure. Sydney's catalog simply listed the price at which the last transaction involving a raccoon had taken place. It was astronomical. His name is Bill, the girl said from behind him. Bill the raccoon. We acquired him just last year from a subsidiary corporation. She pointed past him, and he then perceived the armed company guards standing with their machine guns, the rapid-fire little light Skoda issue. The eyes of the guards had been fastened on him since his car landed, and he thought, my car is clearly marked as a police vehicle. A major manufacturer of androids, he said thoughtfully, invests its surplus capital on living animals. Look at the owl, Rachel Rosen said. Here, I'll wake it up for you. She started toward a small distant cage, in the center of which jutted up a branching dead tree. There are no owls, he started to say, or so we've been told. Sydney's, he thought. They listed in their catalog as extinct, the tiny, precise type, the E, again and again throughout the catalog. As the girl walked ahead of him, he checked to see, and he was right. Sydney's never makes a mistake, he said to himself. We know that, too. What else can we depend on? It's artificial, he said, with sudden realization. His disappointment welled up, keen and intense. No. She smiled, and he saw that she had small, even teeth, as white as her eyes and hair were black. That's Sydney's listing, he said, trying to show her the catalog, to prove it to her. The girl said, We don't buy from Sydney's or from any animal dealer. All our purchases are from private parties, and the prices we pay aren't reported. She added, Also, we have our own naturalists. They're now working up in Canada. There's still a good deal of forest left, comparatively speaking anyhow. Enough for small animals and once in a while a bird. For a long time, he stood gazing at the owl, who dozed on its perch. 1,000 thoughts came into his mind. Thoughts about the war, about the days when owls had fallen from the sky. He remembered how in his childhood it had been discovered that species upon species had become extinct, and how the tapes had reported it each day. Foxes one morning, badgers the next, until people had stopped reading the perpetual animal obits. He thought, too, about his need for a real animal. Within him, an actual hatred once more manifested itself toward his electric sheep. She had to tend, had to care about, as if it lived. The tyranny of an object, he thought. It doesn't know I exist. Like the androids, it had no ability to appreciate the existence of another. He had never thought of this before, the similarity between an electric animal and an Andy. The electric animal, he pondered, could be considered a subform of the other, a kind of vastly inferior robot. Or, conversely, the android could be regarded as a highly developed, evolved version of the ersatz animal. Both viewpoints repelled him. If you sold your owl, he said to the girl Rachel Rosen, how much would you want for it? And how much of that down? We would never sell our owl. She scrutinized him with a mixture of pleasure and pity, or so he read her expression. And even if we sold it, you couldn't possibly pay the price. What kind of animal do you have at home? A sheep, he said. A black-faced Suffolk ewe. Well then, you should be happy. I'm happy, he answered. It's just that I always wanted an owl, even back before they all dropped dead. He corrected himself. All but yours. Rachel said, our present crash program and overall planning call for us to obtain an additional owl which can mate with Scrappy. She indicated the owl dozing on its perch. It had briefly opened both eyes, yellow slits which healed over as the owl settled back down to resume its slumber. Its chest rose conspicuously and fell as if the owl, in its hypnagogic state, had sighed. Breaking away from the sight, it made absolute bitterness blend throughout his prior reaction of awe and yearning. He said, I'd like to test out the selection now. Can we go downstairs? My uncle took the call from your superior, and by now he probably has... Your family? Rick broke in. A corporation this large is a family affair? Continuing her sentence, Rachel said, Uncle Eldon should have an android group and a control group set up by now. So let's go. She strode toward the elevator, hands again thrust violently in the pockets of her coat. She did not look back, and he hesitated for a moment, feeling annoyance, before he at last trailed after her. What have you got against me? He asked her as together they descended. She reflected as if up to now she hadn't known. Well, she said, you, a little police department employee, are in a unique position. Know what I mean? She gave him a malice-filled sidelong glance. How much of your current output, he asked, consists of types equipped with the Nexus 6? All, Rachel said. I'm sure the Void Comp scale will work with them. And if it doesn't, we'll have to withdraw all Nexus 6 types from the market. Her black eyes flamed up. She glowered at him as the elevator ceased descending and its doors slid back. Because you police departments can't do an adequate job in the simple matter of detecting the minuscule number of Nexus 6s who walk. A man, dapper and lean and elderly, approached them, hand extended. On his face, a harried expression showed, as if everything recently had begun happening too fast. I'm Eldon Rosen, he explained to Rick as they shook hands. Listen, Deckard, you realize we don't manufacture anything here on Earth, right? We can't just phone down to production and ask for a diverse flock of items. It's not that we don't want or intend to cooperate with you. Anyhow, I've done the best I can. His left hand shakily rose through his thinning hair. Indicating his department briefcase, Rick said, I'm ready to start. The senior Rosen's nervousness buoyed up his own confidence. They're afraid of me, he realized with a start. Rachel Rosen included. I can probably force them to abandon manufacture of their Nexus 6 types. What I do during the next hour will affect the structure of their operation. It could conceivably determine the future of the Rosen Association here in the United States, in Russia, and on Mars. The two members of the Rosen family studied him apprehensively, and he felt the hollowness of their manner. By coming here, he had brought the void to them, had ushered in emptiness and the hush of economic death. They control inordinate power, he thought. This enterprise is considered one of the system's industrial pivots. The manufacture of androids, in fact, has become so linked to the colonization effort that if one dropped into ruin, so would the other in time. The Rosen Association naturally understood this perfectly. Eldon Rosen had obviously been conscious of it since Harry Bryant's call. I wouldn't worry if I were you, Rick said as the two Rosens led him down a highly illuminated wide corridor. He himself felt quietly content. This moment, more than any other which he could remember, pleased him. Well, they would all soon know what his testing apparatus could accomplish, and could not. If you have no confidence in the Voight Kampf scale, he pointed out, possibly your organization should have researched an alternate test. It can be argued that the responsibility rests partly on you. Oh, thanks. The Rosens had steered him from the corridor and into a chic living roomish cubicle furnished with carpeting, lamps, couch, and modern little end tables on which rested recent magazines, including, he noticed, the February supplement to the Sydney's catalog, which he personally had not seen. In fact, the February supplement wouldn't be out for another 3 days. Obviously, the Rosen Association had a special relationship with Sydney's. Annoyed, he picked up the supplement. This is a violation violation of public trust. Nobody should get advance news of price changes. As a matter of fact, this might violate a federal statute. He tried to remember the relevant law, found he could not. I'm taking this with me, he said, and, opening his briefcase, dropped the supplement within. After an interval of silence, Eldon Rosen said wearily, "Look, officer, it hasn't been our policy to solicit advance." "I'm not a peace officer," Rick said. "I'm a bounty hunter." From his open briefcase, he fished out the Voight-Kampff apparatus, seated himself at a nearby rosewood coffee table, and began to assemble the rather simple polygraphic instruments. "You may send the first testee in," he informed Eldon Rosen, who now looked more haggard than ever. "I'd like to watch," Rachel said, also seating herself. "I've never seen an empathy test being administered. What do those things you have there measure?" Rick said, "This." He held up the flat adhesive disc with its trailing wires. "Measures capillary dilation in the facial area. We know this to be a primary autonomic response, the so-called shame or blushing reaction to a morally shocking stimulus. It can't be controlled voluntarily, as can skin conductivity, respiration, and cardiac rate." He showed her the other instrument, a pencil beam light. "This records fluctuations of tension within the eye muscles. Simultaneous with the blush phenomenon, there generally can be found a small but detectable movement of..." "And these can't be found in androids," Rachel said. "They're not engendered by the stimuli questions, no. Although biologically they exist. Potentially." Rachel said, "Give me the test." "Why?" Rick said, puzzled. Speaking up, Eldon Rosen said hoarsely, "We selected her as your first subject. She may be an android. We're hoping you can tell." He seated himself in a series of clumsy motions, got out a cigarette, lit it, and fixedly watched. 5. The small beam of white light shone steadily into the left eye of Rachel Rosen, and against her cheek the wire mesh disc adhered. She seemed calm. Seated where he could catch the readings on 2 gauges of the Voight-Kampff testing apparatus, Rick Deckard said, "I'm going to outline a number of social situations. You are to express your reaction to each as quickly as possible. You will be timed, of course." "And of course," Rachel said distantly, "my verbal responses won't count. It's solely the eye muscle and capillary reaction that you'll use as indices. But I'll answer. I want to go through this and..." She broke off. "Go ahead, Mr. Deckard." Rick, selecting question 3, said, "You were given a calfskin wallet on your birthday. Both gauges immediately registered past the green and onto the red. The needles swung violently and then subsided." "I wouldn't accept it," Rachel said. "Also, I'd report the person who gave it to me to the police." After making a jot of notation, Rick continued, turning to the 8th question of the Voight-Kampff profile scale. "You have a little boy, and he shows you his butterfly collection, including his killing jar. I take him to the doctor." Rachel's voice was low but firm. Again, the twin gauges registered, but this time not so far. He made a note of that, too. "You're sitting watching TV," he continued, "and suddenly you discover a wasp crawling on your wrist." Rachel said, "I'd kill it." The gauges, this time, registered almost nothing, only a feeble and momentary tremor. He noted that and hunted cautiously for the next question. "In a magazine, you come across a full-page color picture of a nude girl." He paused. "Is this testing whether I'm an android?" Rachel asked partly, "or whether I'm homosexual?" The words did not register. He continued, "Your husband likes the picture." Still the gauges failed to indicate a reaction. "Girl," he added, "is lying face down on a large and beautiful bearskin rug." The gauges remained inert, and said to himself, "An android response." Failing to detect posters and you wander in to look closer. He follows after you, closing the door. Putting his arm around you, he says, Rachel interrupted. What's a bullfight poster? Drawings, usually in color and very large, showing a matador with his cape, a bull trying to gore him. He was puzzled. How old are you? He asked. That might be a factor. I'm 18, Rachel said. Okay, so this man closes the door and puts his arm around me. What does he say? Rick said, Do you know how bullfights ended? I suppose somebody got hurt. The bull, at the end, was always killed. He waited, watching the two needles. They palpitated restlessly, nothing more. No real reading at all. Final question, he said. Two-part. You are watching an old movie on TV, a movie from before the war. It shows a banquet in progress. The guests are enjoying raw oysters. Rachel said. The needles swung swiftly. The entree, he continued, consists of boiled dog stuffed with rice. The needles moved less this time, less than they had for the raw oysters. Are raw oysters more acceptable to you than a dish of boiled dog? Evidently not. He put his pencil down, shut off the beam of light, removed the adhesive patch from her cheek. You're an android, he said. That's the conclusion of the testing. He informed her, or rather it, and Eldon Rosen, who regarded him with writhing worry. The elderly man's face contorted, shifted plastically with angry concern. I'm right, aren't I? Rick said. There was no answer from either of the Rosens. Look, he said reasonably, we have no conflict of interest. It's important to me that the Voight-Kampff test functions, almost as important as it is to you. The elder Rosen said, She's not an android. I don't believe it, Rick said. Why would he lie? Rachel said to Rick fiercely. If anything, we'd lie the other way. I want a bone marrow analysis made of you, Rick said to her. It can eventually be organically determined whether you're android or not. It's slow and painful, admittedly, but legally, Rachel said, I can't be forced to undergo a bone marrow test. That's been established in the courts. Self-incrimination. And anyhow, on a live person, not the corpse of a retired android, it takes a long time. You can give that damn Voight-Kampff profile test because of the specials. They have to be tested for constantly. And while the government was doing that, you police agencies slipped the Voight-Kampff through. But what you said is true. That's the end of the testing. She rose to her feet, paced away from him, and stood with her hands on her hips, her back to him. The issue is not the legality of the bone marrow analysis, Eldon Rosen said huskily. The issue is that your empathy delineation test failed in response to my niece. I can explain why she scored as an android might. Rachel grew up aboard Salander 3. She was born on it. She spent 14 of her 18 years living off its tape library and what the 9 other crew members, all adults, knew about Earth. Then, as you know, the ship turned back a sixth of the way to Proxima. Otherwise, Rachel would never have seen Earth. Anyhow, not until her later life. You would have retired me, Rachel said over her shoulder. In a police dragnet, I would have been killed. I've known that since I got here 4 years ago. This isn't the first time the Voight-Kampff test has been given to me. In fact, I rarely leave this building. The risk is enormous because of those roadblocks you police set up, those flying wedge spot checks to pick up unclassified specials. And androids, Eldon Rosen added, although naturally the public isn't told that. They're entirely from your method of operation, Mr. Rosen. Nobody forced your organization to evolve the production of humanoid robots to a point where we produced what the colonists wanted, Eldon Rosen said. We followed the time-honored principle underlying every commercial venture. If our firm hadn't made these progressively more human types, other firms in the field would have. We knew the risk we were taking when we developed the Nexus 6 brain unit, but your Voight-Kampff test was a failure before we released that type of android. If you had failed to classify a Nexus 6 android as an android, if you had checked it out as human, that's not what happened. His voice had become hard and bitingly penetrating. Your police department, others as well, may have retired, very probably have retired, authentic humans with underdeveloped empathic abilities, such as my innocent niece here. Your position, Mr. Deckard, is extremely bad morally. Ours isn't. In other words, Rick said with acuity, I'm not going to be given a chance to check out a single Nexus 6. You people dropped this schizoid girl on me beforehand. And my test, he realized, is wiped out. I shouldn't have gone for it, he said to himself. However, it's too late now. We have you, Mr. Deckard, Rachel Rosen agreed in a quiet, reasonable voice. She turned toward him then and smiled. He could not make out, even now, how the Rosen Association had managed to snare him, and so easily. Experts, he realized. A mammoth corporation like this, it embodies too much experience. It possesses, in fact, a sort of group mind, and Eldon and Rachel Rosen consisted as spokesmen for that corporate entity. His mistake, evidently, had been in viewing them as individuals. It was a mistake he would not make again. Your superior, Mr. Bryant, Eldon Rosen said, will have difficulty understanding how you happened to let us void your testing apparatus before the test began. He pointed toward the ceiling, and Rick saw the camera lens. His massive error in dealing with the Rosens had been recorded. I think the right thing for us all to do, Eldon said, is sit down and... He gestured affably. We can work something out, Mr. Deckard. There's no need for anxiety. The Nexus 6 variety of android is a fact. We here at the Rosen Association recognize it, and I think now you do too. Rachel, leaning toward Rick, said, how would you like to own an owl? I doubt if I'll ever own an owl. But he knew what she meant. He understood the business the Rosen Association wanted to transact. Tension of a kind he had never felt before manifested itself inside him. It exploded, leisurely, in every part of his body. He felt the tension, the consciousness of what was happening, take over completely. But an owl, Eldon Rosen said, is the thing you want. He glanced at his niece inquiringly. I don't think he has any idea. Of course he does, Rachel contradicted. He knows exactly where this is heading. Don't you, Mr. Deckard? Again, she leaned toward him, and this time closer. He could smell a mild perfume about her, almost a warmth. You're practically there, Mr. Deckard. You practically have your owl. To Eldon Rosen, she said, he's a bounty hunter, remember? So he lives off the bounty he makes, not his salary. Isn't that so, Mr. Deckard? He nodded. How many androids escaped this time? Rachel inquired. Presently, he said, 8. Originally. 2 have already been retired. By someone else, not me. You get how much for each android? Rachel asked. Shrugging, he said, it varies. Rachel said, if you have no test you can administer, then there is no way you can identify an android. And if there's no way you can identify an android, there's no way you can collect your bounty. So if the Voight-Kampff scale has to be abandoned, a new scale, Rick said, will replace it. This has happened before. 3 times to be exact. The new scale, the more modern analytical device, had been there already. No lag had existed. This time was different. Eventually, of course, the Voight-Kampff scale will become obsolete, Rachel agreed. But not now. We're satisfied ourselves that it will delineate the Nexus 6 types, and we'd like you to proceed on that basis in your own particular, peculiar work. Rocking back and forth, her arms tightly folded, she regarded him with intensity, trying to fathom his reaction. Tell him he can have his owl, Eldon Rosen grated. We insist on getting the complete brood. If you can't agree to that, go on back to San Francisco and admit to your superiors in the department that the Voight-Kampff scale, at least as administered by you, can't distinguish an Andy from a human being. And then look for another job. Give me some time, Rick said. Okay, Rachel said. We'll leave you in here, where it's comfortable. She examined her wristwatch. Half an hour, Eldon Rosen said. He and Rachel filed toward the door of the room silently. They had said what they intended to say, he realized. The rest lay in his lap. As Rachel started to close the door after herself and her uncle, Rick said starkly, "You managed to set me up perfectly. You have it on tape that I missed on you. You know that my job depends on the use of the Voight-Kampff scale. You own that goddamn owl." "Your owl, dear," Rachel said. "Remember? We'll tie your home address around its leg and have it fly down to San Francisco. It'll meet you there when you get off work." It, he thought. She keeps calling the owl it, not her. "Just a second," he said. Pausing at the door, Rachel said, "You've decided?" "I want," he said, opening his briefcase, "to ask you one more question from the Voight-Kampff scale. Sit down again." Rachel glanced at her uncle. He nodded and she grudgingly returned, seating herself as before. "What's this for?" she demanded, her eyebrows lifted in distaste and wariness. He perceived her skeletal tension, noted it professionally. Presently he had the pencil of light trained on her right eye, and the adhesive patch again in contact with her cheek. Rachel stared into the light rigidly, the expression of extreme distaste still manifest. "My briefcase," Rick said as he rummaged for the Voight-Kampff forms. "Nice, isn't it? Department issue." Well, Rachel said remotely. "Baby hide," Rick said. He stroked the black leather surface of the briefcase. 100% genuine human baby hide. He saw the two dial indicators gyrate frantically. But only after a pause. The reaction had come, but too late. He knew the reaction period down to a fraction of a second. The correct reaction period. There should have been none. "Thanks, Miss Rosen," he said, and gathered together the equipment again. He had concluded his retesting. "That's all." "You're leaving?" Rachel asked. "Yes," he said. "I'm satisfied." Cautiously, Rachel said, "What about the other 9 subjects?" "The scale has been adequate in your case," he answered. "I can extrapolate from that. It's clearly still effective." To Eldon Rosen, who slumped morosely by the door of the room, he said, "Does she know?" Sometimes they didn't. False memories had been tried various times, generally in the mistaken idea that through them, reactions to testing would be altered. Eldon Rosen said, "No, we programmed her completely. But I think toward the end she suspected." To the girl, he said, "You guessed when he asked for one more try." Pale, Rachel nodded fixedly. "Don't be afraid of him," Eldon Rosen told her. "You're not an escaped android on Earth illegally. You're the property of the Rosen Association, used as a sales device for prospective immigrants." He walked to the girl, put his hand comfortingly on her shoulder. At the touch, the girl flinched. "He's right," Rick said. "I'm not going to retire you, Miss Rosen. Good day." He started toward the door, then halted briefly. To the two of them, he said, "Is the owl genuine?" Rachel glanced swiftly at the elder Rosen. "He's leaving anyhow," Eldon Rosen said. "It doesn't matter. The owl is artificial. There are no owls." Rick muttered, and stepped numbly out into the corridor. The two of them watched him go. Neither said anything. Nothing remained to say. "So that's how the largest manufacturer of androids operates," Rick said to himself. Devious, and in a manner he had never encountered before. a weird and convoluted new personality type. No wonder law enforcement agencies were having trouble with the Nexus 6. The Nexus 6. He had now come up against it. Rachel, he realized, she must be a Nexus 6. I'm seeing one of them for the first time, and they damn near did it. They came awfully damn close to undermining the Voight comp scale, the only method we have for detecting them. The Rosen Association does a good job, makes a good try, anyhow, at protecting its products. And I have to face 6 more of them, he reflected, before I'm finished. He would earn the bounty money, every cent, assuming he made it through alive. The TV set boomed. Descending the great empty apartment building's dust-stricken stairs to the level below, John Isidore made out now the familiar voice of Buster Friendly, burbling happily to his system-wide vast audience. Ho-ho, folks! Zip, click, zip! Time for a brief note on tomorrow's weather. First, the eastern seaboard of the USA. Mongoose Satellite reports that fallout will be especially pronounced toward noon and then will taper off. So all you dear folks who will be venturing out ought to wait until afternoon, eh? And speaking of waiting, it's now only 10 hours till that big piece of news, my special expose. Tell your friends to watch. I'm revealing something that'll amaze you. Now you might guess that it's just the usual. As Isidore knocked on the apartment door, the television died immediately into non-being. It had not merely become silent, it had stopped existing, scared into its grave by his knock. He sensed, behind the closed door, the presence of life beyond that of the TV. His straining faculties manufactured or else picked up a haunted, painless fear by someone retreating from him, someone blown back to the farthest wall of the apartment in an attempt to evade him. Hey, he called. I live upstairs. I heard your TV. Let's meet, okay? He waited, listening. No sound and no motion. His words had not pried the person loose. I brought you a cube of margarine, he said, standing close to the door in an effort to speak through its thickness. My name's J.R. Isidore, and I work for the well-known animal vet, Mr. Hannibal Slope. You've heard of him. I'm reputable. I have a job. I drive Mr. Slope's truck. The door meagerly opened, and he saw within the apartment a fragmented and misaligned, shrinking figure, a girl who cringed and slunk away, yet held onto the door as if for physical support. Fear made her seem ill. It distorted her body lines, made her appear as if someone had broken her and then, with malice, patched her together badly. Her eyes, enormous, glazed over fixedly as she attempted to smile. He said, with sudden understanding, "You thought no one lived in this building. You thought it was abandoned." Nodding, the girl whispered, "Yes." "But," Isidore said, "it's good to have neighbors. Back until you came along, I didn't have any. And that was no fun, God knew." "You're the only one?" the girl asked. "In this building besides me?" She seemed less timid now. Her body straightened, and with her hand, she smoothed her dark hair. Now he saw that she had a nice figure, although small, and nice eyes, markedly established by long black lashes. Caught by surprise, the girl wore pajama bottoms and nothing more. And as he looked past her, he perceived a room in disorder. Suitcases lay here and there, opened, their contents half spilled onto the littered floor. But this was natural, she had barely arrived. "I'm the only one besides you," Isidore said, "and I won't bother you." He felt glum. His offering, possessing the quality of an authentic old pre-war ritual, had not been accepted. In fact, the girl did not even seem aware of it. Or maybe she did not understand what a cube of margarine was for. He had that intuition. The girl seemed more bewildered than anything else. Out of her depth and helplessly floating in now receding circles of fear. "Good old Buster," he said, trying to reduce her rigid postural stance. "You like him? I watch him every morning, and then again at night when I get home. I watch him while I'm eating dinner, and then his late show until I go to bed. At least until my TV set broke." "Who?" the girl began, and then broke off. She bit her lip, as if savagely angry, evidently at herself. "Mr. Friendly," he explained. "It's here alone too long. I've become strange. They say chicken heads are like that. The thought made him feel even more glum. I could help you unpack, he ventured. The door now had virtually shut in his face. And your furniture, the girl said. I have no furniture. All these things. She indicated the room behind her. They were here. They won't do, Isidore said. He could tell that at a glance. The chairs, the carpet, the tables, all had rotted away. They sagged in mutual ruin, victims of the despotic force of time and of abandonment. No one had lived in his apartment for years. The ruin had become almost complete. He couldn't imagine how she figured on living in such surroundings. Listen, he said earnestly. If we go all over the building looking, we can probably find you things that aren't so tattered. A lamp from one apartment, a table from another. I'll do it, the girl said. Myself, thanks. You go into those apartments alone? He could not believe it. Why not? Again she shuddered nervously, grimacing in awareness of saying something wrong. Isidore said, I tried it. Once. After that I just come home and go in my own place and I don't think about the rest. The apartments in which no one lives. Hundreds of them, and all full of the possessions people had, like family photographs and clothes. Those that died couldn't take anything, and those who emigrated didn't want to. This building, except for my apartment, is completely kipplized. Kipplized? She did not comprehend. Kipple is useless objects like junk mail or match folders after you use the last match, or gum wrappers, or yesterday's homeopath. When nobody's around, kipple reproduces itself. For instance, if you go to bed leaving any kipple around your apartment, when you wake up the next morning, there's twice as much of it. It always gets more and more. I see. The girl regarded him uncertainly, not knowing whether to believe him, not sure if he meant it seriously. There's the first law of kipple, he said. Kipple drives out non-kipple. Like Gresham's law about bad money. And in these apartments, there's been nobody there to fight the kipple. So it has taken over completely, the girl finished. She nodded. Now I understand. Your place here, he said. This apartment you've picked. It's too kippleized to live in. We can roll the kipple factor back. We can do, like I said, raid the other acts. But... He broke off. But what? Isidore said. We can't win. Why not? The girl stepped into the hall, closing the door behind her. Arms folded self-consciously before her small high breasts. She faced him, eager to understand. Or so it appeared to him, anyhow. She was at least listening. No one can win against kipple, he said. Except temporarily and maybe in one spot, like in my apartment. I've sort of created a stasis between the pressure of kipple and non-kipple for the time being. But eventually I'll die or go away and then the kipple will again take over. It's a universal principle operating throughout the universe. The entire universe is moving toward a final state of total, absolute kippleization, he added. Except, of course, for the upward climb of Wilbur Mercer. The girl eyed him. I don't see any relation. That's what Mercerism is all about. Again, he found himself puzzled. Don't you participate in fusion? Don't you own an empathy box? After a pause, the girl said carefully, I didn't bring mine with me. I assumed I'd find one here. But an empathy box, he said, stammering in his excitement, is the most personal possession you have. It's an extension of your body. It's the way you touch other humans. It's the way you stop being alone. But you know that. Everybody knows that. Mercer even lets people like me... He broke off. But too late. He had already told her, and he could see by her face, by the flicker of sudden aversion, that she knew. I almost passed the IQ test, he said in a low, shaky voice. I'm not very special, only moderately. Not like some you see. But that's what Mercer doesn't care about. As far as I'm concerned, the girl said, you can count that as a major objection to Mercerism. Her voice was clean and neutral. She intended to leave his state of fact, he realized. The fact of her attitude toward chicken heads. I guess I'll go back upstairs, he said, and started away from her. His cube of logic was crushed. It had become plastic and damp. shut after her, and he found himself alone in a dust-strewn, dim hall. 7. Well, so it goes, J.R. Isidore thought as he stood clutching his soft cube of margarine. Maybe she'll change her mind about letting me call her Pris. And possibly if I can pick up a can of pre-war vegetables, about dinner too. But maybe she doesn't know how to cook, he thought suddenly. Okay, I can do it. I'll fix dinner for both of us. And I'll show her how so she can do it in the future if she wants. She'll probably want to once I show her how. As near as I can make out, most women, even young ones like her, like to cook. It's an instinct. Ascending the darkened stairs, he returned to his own apartment. She's really out of touch, he thought as he donned his white work uniform. Even if he hurried, he'd be late to work and Mr. Sloat would be angry. But so what? For instance, she's never heard of Buster Friendly, and that's impossible. Buster is the most important human being alive, except of course for Wilbur Mercer. But Mercer, he reflected, isn't a human being. He evidently is an archetypal entity from the stars, superimposed on our culture by a cosmic template. At least that's what I've heard people say. That's what Mr. Sloat says, for instance. And Hannibal Sloat would know. Odd that she isn't consistent about her own name, he pondered. She may need help. Can I give her any help? He asked himself. Special a chicken head. What do I know? I can't marry and I can't emigrate and the dust will eventually kill me. I have nothing to offer. Dressed and ready to go, he left his apartment and descended to the roof where his battered used hover car lay parked. An hour later, in the company truck, he had picked up the first malfunctioning animal for the day, an electric cat. It lay in the plastic dust-proof carrying cage in the rear of the truck and panted erratically. You'd almost think it was real, Isidore observed as he headed back to the Van Ness Pet Hospital, that carefully misnamed little enterprise which barely existed in the tough competitive field of false animal repair. The cat, in its travail, groaned. Wow, Isidore said to himself. It really sounds as if it's dying. Maybe its 10-year battery has shorted, and all its circuits are systematically burning out. A major job. Milt Wargrove, Van Ness Pet Hospital's repairman, would have his hands full. And I didn't give the owner an estimate, Isidore realized gloomily. The guy simply thrust the cat at me, said it had begun failing during the night, and then I guess he took off for work. Anyhow, all of a sudden the momentary verbal exchange had ceased. The cat's owner had gone roaring up into the sky in his custom new model handsome hover car, and the man constituted a new customer. To the cat, Isidore said, "Can you hang on until we reach the shop?" The cat continued to wheeze. "I'll recharge you while we're en route," Isidore decided. He dropped the truck toward the nearest available roof and there, temporarily parked with the motor running, crawled into the back of the truck and opened the plastic dust-proof carrying cage, which, in conjunction with his own white suit and the name on the truck, created a total impression of a true animal vet picking up a true animal. The electric mechanism, within its compellingly authentic style gray pelt, gurgled and blew bubbles, its vid lenses glassy, its metal jaws locked together. This had always amazed him, these disease circuits built into false animals. The construct which he now held on his lap had been put together in such a fashion that when a primary component misfired, the whole thing appeared, not broken, but organically ill. It would have fooled me, Isidore said to himself as he groped within the ersatz stomach fur for the concealed control panel, quite small on this variety of false animal, plus the quick-charge battery terminals. He could find neither, nor could he search very long. The mechanism had almost failed. It does consist of a short, he reflected, which is busy burning out circuits, and maybe I should try to detach one of the battery cables. The mechanism will shut down, but no more harm will be done. And then, in the shop, Milt can charge it back up. getting the 3 times yearly preventive cleaning and lubricating, which made all the difference. Maybe this would teach the owner the hard way. Crawling back to the driver's seat, he put the wheel into climb position, tossed up into the air once more, and resumed his flight back to the repair shop. Anyhow, he no longer had to listen to the nerve-wracking wheezing of the construct. He could relax. Funny, he thought. Even though I know rationally it's faked, the sound of a false animal burning out its drivetrain and power supply ties my stomach in knots. I wish, he thought painfully, that I could get another job. If I hadn't failed that IQ test, I wouldn't be reduced to this ignominious task with its attendant emotional byproducts. On the other hand, the synthetic sufferings of false animals didn't bother Milt Wargrove or their boss Hannibal Sloat. So maybe it's I, John Isidore said to himself. Maybe when you deteriorate back down the ladder of evolution as I have, when you sink into the tomb world slough of being a special, well, best to abandon that line of inquiry. Nothing depressed him more than the moments in which he contrasted his current mental powers with what he had formerly possessed. Every day he declined in sagacity and vigor. He and the thousands of other specials throughout Terra, all of them moving toward the ash heap, turning into living kipple. For company, he clicked on the truck's radio and tuned for Buster Friendly's Odd Show, which, like the TV version, continued 23 unbroken warm hours a day, the additional 1 hour being a religious sign-off, 10 minutes of silence, and then a religious sign-on. Glad to have you on this show again, Buster Friendly was saying. Let's see, Amanda, it's been 2 whole days since we visited with you. Starting on any new picks, dear? Well, I was going to do a pick yesterday, but well, they wanted me to start at 7. 7 a.m., Buster Friendly broke in. Yes, that's right, Buster. It was 7 a.m. Amanda Vanner laughed her famous laugh, nearly as imitated as Buster's. Amanda Vanner and several other beautiful, elegant, conically breasted foreign ladies from unspecified, vaguely defined countries, plus a few bucolic so-called humorists, comprised Buster's perpetual core of repeats. Women like Amanda Vanner never made movies, never appeared in plays. They lived out their queer, beautiful lives as guests on Buster's unending show, appearing, Isidore had once calculated, as much as 70 hours a week. How did Buster Friendly find the time to tape both his odd and big shows, Isidore wondered. And how did Amanda Vanner find time to be a guest every other day, month after month, year after year? How did they keep talking? They never repeated themselves, not so far as he could determine. Their remarks, always witty, always new, weren't rehearsed. Amanda's hair glowed, her eyes glinted, her teeth shone. She never ran down, never became tired, never found herself at a loss as to a clever retort to Buster's bang-bang string of quips, jokes, and sharp observations. The Buster Friendly Show, telecast and broadcast all over Earth via satellite, also poured down on the emigrants of the colony planets. Practice transmissions beamed to Proxima had been attempted in case human colonization extended that far. Had the Salander 3 reached its destination, the travelers aboard would have found the Buster Friendly Show awaiting them, and they would have been glad. But something about Buster Friendly irritated John Isidore, one specific thing. In subtle, almost inconspicuous ways, Buster ridiculed the empathy boxes. Not once, but many times. He was, in fact, doing it right now. No rock nicks on me, Buster prattled away to Amanda Werner. And if I'm going up the side of a mountain, I want a couple of bottles of Budweiser beer along. The studio audience laughed, and Isidore heard a sprinkling of hand claps. And I'll reveal my carefully documented expose from up there. That expose coming exactly 10 hours from now. And me, too, darling, Amanda gushed. Take me with you. I'll go along, and when they throw a rock at us, I'll protect you. Again the audience howled, and John Isidore felt baffled and impotent rage seep up into the back of his neck. Why did Buster Friendly always chip away at mercerism? No one else seemed bothered by it. Even the UN approved, and the American and Soviet police had publicly stated that mercerism reduced crime by making citizens more concerned about the plight of their neighbors. Mankind needs more empathy, Titus Corning, the UN Secretary General, had declared several times. Maybe Buster is jealous, Isidore conjectured. themselves. The empathy box on one hand, Buster's guffaws, and off-the-cuff jibes on the other. I'll have to tell Hannibal Sloat that, he decided. Ask him if it's true. He'll know. When he had parked his truck on the roof of the Van Ness Pet Hospital, he quickly carried the plastic cage containing the inert false cat downstairs to Hannibal Sloat's office. As he entered, Mr. Sloat glanced up from a parts inventory page, his gray, seamed face rippling like troubled water. Too old to emigrate, Hannibal Sloat, although not a special, was doomed to creep out his remaining life on Earth. The dust over the years had eroded him. It had left his features gray, his thoughts gray. It had shrunk him and made his legs spindly and his gait unsteady. He saw the world through glasses literally dense with dust. For some reason, Sloat never cleaned his glasses. It was as if he had given up. He had accepted the radioactive dirt, and it had begun its job long ago of burying him. Already it obscured his sight. In the few years he had remaining, it would corrupt his other senses until at last only his bird-screeched voice would remain. And then that would expire too. "What do you have there?" Mr. Sloat asked. "A cat with a short in its power supply." Isidore set the cage down on the document-littered desk of his boss. "Why show it to me?" Sloat demanded. "Take it down in the shop to Milt." However, reflexively, he opened the cage and tugged the false animal out. Once he had been a repairman. A very good one. Isidore said, "I think Buster Friendly and Mercerism are fighting for control of our psychic souls." "If so," Sloat said, examining the cat, "Buster is winning." "He's winning now," Isidore said, "but ultimately he'll lose." Sloat lifted his head, peered at him. "Why?" "Because Wilbur Mercer is always renewed. He's eternal. At the top of the hill he struck down, he sinks into the tomb world, then he rises inevitably. And us with him, so we're eternal too." He felt good, speaking so well. Usually around Mr. Sloat he stammered. Sloat said, "Buster is immortal, like Mercer. There's no difference." "How can he be? He's a man." "I don't know," Sloat said, "but it's true. They've never admitted it, of course." "Is that how come Buster Friendly can do 46 hours of show a day?" "That's right," Sloat said. "What about Amanda Vanner and those other women? They're immortal too. Are they a superior life form from another system?" "I've never been able to determine that for sure," Mr. Sloat said, still examining the cat. He now removed his dust-filled glasses, peered without them at the half-open mouth. "As I have conclusively in the case of Wilbur Mercer," he finished almost inaudibly. He cursed, then, a string of abuse, lasting what seemed to Isidore a full minute. "This cat," Sloat said finally, "isn't false. I knew sometime this would happen. And it's dead." He stared down at the corpse of the cat, and cursed again. Wearing his grimy blue sailcloth apron, burly, pebble-skinned Milt Wargrove appeared at the office door. "What's the matter?" he said. Seeing the cat, he entered the office and picked up the animal. "The chicken head," Sloat said, "brought it in." Never before had he used that term in front of Isidore. "If it was still alive," Milt said, "we could take it to a real animal vet. I wonder what it's worth. Anybody got a copy of Sydney's?" "Doesn't your insurance cover this?" Isidore asked Mr. Sloat. Under him, his legs wavered, and he felt the room begin to turn dark maroon, cast over with specks of green. "Yes," Sloat said finally, half snarling. "But it's the waste that gets me. The loss of one more living creature. Couldn't you tell, Isidore? Didn't you notice the difference?" "I thought," Isidore managed to say, "it was a really good job. So good it fooled me. I mean, it seemed alive, and a job that good." "I don't think Isidore can tell the difference," Milt said mildly. "To him, they're all alive, false animals included. He probably tried to save it." To Isidore, he said, "What did you do, try to recharge its battery? Or locate a short in it?" "Yes," Isidore admitted. "It probably probably was so far gone it wouldn't have made it anyhow, Milt said. Let the chicken head off the hook, Han. He's got a point. The fakes are beginning to be darn near real, what with those disease circuits they're building into the new ones. And living animals do die. That's one of the risks in owning them. We're just not used to it because all we see are fakes.
The goddamn waste,
Sloat said. According to Mercer, Isidore pointed out, all life returns. The cycle is complete for animals too. I mean, we all ascend with him, die.
Tell that's the guy that owned this cat.
Mr. Sloat said. Not sure if his boss was serious, Isidore said.
You mean I have to? Did you always handle vid calls?
He had a phobia about the vidphone and found making a call, especially to a stranger, virtually impossible. Mr. Sloat, of course, knew this. Don't make him, Milt said. I'll do it. He reached for the receiver. What's his number?
I've got it here somewhere.
Isidore fumbled in his work smock pockets. Sloat said,
I want the chicken head to do it.
I can't use the vidphone, Isidore protested, his heart laboring.
Because I'm hairy, ugly, dirty, stooped, snaggletooth, and gray. And also I feel sick from the radiation. I think I'm going to die.
Milt smiled and said to Sloat, I guess if I felt that way, I wouldn't use the vidphone either. Come on, Isidore. If you don't give me the owner's number, I can't make the call, and you'll have to. He held out his hand amiably.
The chicken head makes it,
Sloat said.
or he's fired.
He did not look either at Isidore or at Milt. He glared fixedly forward. Oh, come on, Milt protested. Isidore said,
I don't like to be called a chicken head. I mean, the dust has done a lot to you too, physically. Although maybe not your brain, as in my case.
I'm fired, he realized. I can't make the call. And then all at once he remembered that the owner of the cat had zipped off to work. There would be no one home.
I guess I can call him,
He said, as he fished out the tag with the information on it.
See?
Mr. Sloat said to Milt.
He can do it if he has to.
Seated at the vidphone, receiver in hand, Isidore dialed. Yeah, Milt said, but he shouldn't have to. And he's right. The dust has affected you. You're damn near blind, and in a couple of years you won't be able to hear. Sloat said,
It's got to you too, Margot. Your skin is the color of dog manure.
on the vid screen, a face appeared. Anita Paisha, a somewhat careful-looking woman who wore her hair in a tight bun.
Yes?
She said,
Mrs. Pilson?
Isidore said, terror spewing through him. He had not thought of it naturally, but the owner had a wife who, of course, was home.
I want to talk to you about your
He broke off, rubbed his chin tickwise.
your cat. Oh, yes, you picked up Horace.
Mrs. Pilson said.
Did it turn out to be pneumonitis? That's what Mr. Pilson thought.
Isidore said,
Your cat died. Oh no, God in heaven. We'll replace it,
he said.
we have insurance.
He glanced toward Mr. Sloat. He seemed to concur.
The owner of our firm, Mr. Campbell Sloat,
He floundered.
will personally... No,
Sloat said,
we'll give him a check. Sydney's list price. We'll personally pick the replacement cat out for you.
Isidore found himself saying. Having started a conversation which he could not endure, he discovered himself unable to get back out. What he was saying possessed an intrinsic logic which he had no means of halting. It had to grind to its own conclusion. Both Mr. Sloat and Milt Borogrove stared at him as he rattled on.
Give us the specifications of the cat you desire. Color, sex, subtype, such as Manx, Persian, Abyssinian. Horace is dead,
Mrs. Pilson said.
he had pneumonitis.
Isidore said.
He died on the trip to the hospital. Our senior staff physician, Dr. Hannibal Sloat, expressed the belief that nothing at this point could have saved him. But isn't it fortunate, Mrs. Pilson, that we're going to replace him? Am I correct?
Pilson, tears appearing in her eyes, said,
There is only one cat like Horace. He used to, when he was just a kitten, stand and stare up at us as if asking a question. We never understood what the question was. Maybe now he knows the answer.
fresh tears appeared.
I guess we all will eventually.
An inspiration came to Isidore.
What about an exact electric duplicate of your cat? We can have a superb handcrafted job by wheel-riding carpenter in which every detail of the old animal is faithfully repeated in permanent... Oh, that's dreadful.
Mrs. Pilson protested.
What are you saying? Don't tell my husband that. Don't suggest that to Ed or he'll go mad. He loved Horace more than any cat he ever had, and he's had a cat since he was a child.
Taking the vidphone receiver from Isidore, Milt said to the woman, We can give you a check in the amount of Sydney's list, or as Mr. Isidore suggested, we can pick out a new cat for you. We're very sorry that your cat died, but as Mr. Isidore pointed out, the cat had pneumonitis, which is almost always fatal. His tone rolled out professionally. Of the three of them at the Van Ness Pet Hospital, Milt performed the best in the matter of business phone calls.
I can't tell my husband.
Mrs. Pilson said. All right, ma'am, Milt said, and grimaced slightly. We'll call him. Would you give me his number at his place of employment? He groped for a pen and pad of paper. Mr. Sloat handed them to him.
Listen,
Mrs. Pilson said. She seemed out to rally.
maybe the other gentleman is right. Maybe I ought to commission an electric replacement of Horace, but without Ed ever knowing. Could it be so faithful a reproduction that my husband wouldn't be able to tell?
Dubiously, Milt said, If that's what you want. But it's been our experience that the owner of the animal is never fooled. It's only casual observers such as neighbors. You see, once you get real close to a false animal...
I never got physically close to Horace, even though he loved him. I was the one who took care of all Horace's personal needs, such as his sandbox. I think I would like to try a false animal, and if it didn't work, then you could find us a real cat to replace Horace. I just don't want my husband to know. I don't think he could live through it. That's why he never got close to Horace. He was afraid to. And when Horace got sick, with pneumonitis, as you tell me, and got panic-stricken and just wouldn't face it, that's why we waited so long to call you. Too long. As I knew before you called. I knew.
She nodded, her tears under control now.
How long will it take?
Milt essayed. We can have it ready in 10 days. We'll deliver it during the day while your husband is at work. He wound up the call, said goodbye, and hung up. He'll know, he said to Mr. Sloat. In 5 seconds. That's what she wants.
Owners who get to love their animals,
Sloat said somberly.
go to pieces. I'm glad we're not usually involved with real animals. You realize that actual animal vets have to make calls like that all the time.
He contemplated John Isidore.
In some ways, you're not so stupid after all, Isidore. You handled that reasonably well. Even though Milt had to come in and take over.
He was doing fine, Milt said. God, that was tough. He picked up the dead Horace. I'll take this down to the shop. And you phone Wheelwright and Carpenter and get their builder over to measure and photograph it. I'm not going to let them take it to their shop. I want to compare the replica myself.
I think I'll have Isidore talk to them.
Mr. Sloat decided.
He got this started. He ought to be able to deal with Wheelwright and Carpenter after handling Mrs. Pilson.
Milt said to Isidore, Just don't let them take the original. He held up Horace. They'll want to because it makes their work a hell of a lot easier. Be firm. Isidore said, blinking.
Okay. Maybe I ought to call them now before it starts to decay. Don't dead bodies decay or something?
He felt elated. After parking the department's speedy, beefed-up hover car on the roof of the San Francisco he would be able to recoup enough for the job ahead. "How's Dave?" he asked. "Well enough for me to go talk to him? I want to before I tackle the first of the Andes." Brian said, "We'll be trying for Polikoff first, the one that laser Dave. Best to get him right out of it since he knows we've got him listed. Before I talk to Dave..." Bryant reached for a sheet of onion skin paper, a blurred third or fourth carbon. "Polikoff has taken a job with the city as a trash collector, a scavenger. Don't only specials do that kind of work? Polikoff is mimicking a special, an ant head. Very deteriorated, or so he pretends to be. That's what suckered Dave. Polikoff apparently looks and acts so much like an ant head that Dave forgot. Are you sure about the Voight-Kampf scale now? You're absolutely certain from what happened up in Seattle that..." "I am," Rick said shortly. He did not amplify. Brian said, "I'll take your word for it. There can't be even one slip-up. There never could be in Andy hunting, but this is no different. The Nexus 6 is different." "I already found my first one," Rick said. "And Dave found two. Three if you count Polikoff. Okay, I'll retire Polikoff today, and then maybe tonight or tomorrow talk to Dave." He reached for the blurred carbon, the poop sheet on the android Polikoff. "One more item," Brian said. "A Soviet cop from the WPO is on his way here. While you were in Seattle, I got a call from him. He's aboard an Aeroflot rocket that'll touch down at the public field here in about an hour. Sandor Kadalyi, his name is." "What's he want?" Rarely, if ever, did WPO cops show up in San Francisco. WPO is enough interested in the new Nexus 6 types. They want a man of theirs to be with you, an observer, and also, if he can, he'll assist you. It's for you to decide when and if you can be of value, but I've already given him permission to tag along." "What about the bounty?" Rick said. "You won't have to split it," Brian said, and smiled creepily. "I just wouldn't regard it as financially fair." He had absolutely no intention of sharing his winnings with a fellow from WPO. He studied the poop sheet on Polikoff. It gave a description of the man, or rather the Andy, his current address and place of business, the Bay Area Scavengers Company with offices on Erie. "Want to wait on the Polikoff retirement until the Soviet cop gets here to help you?" Brian asked. Rick bristled. "I've always worked alone. Of course, it's your decision. I'll do whatever you say. But I just assume you have to Polikoff right now without waiting for the dog to take him down." "Go ahead, I know," Bryant decided. "And then on the next one, which will be a Miss Lubeloff, you have the sheet there on her too. You can bring in Kadalyi." Having stuffed the onion skin carbons in his briefcase, Rick left his superior's office and descended once more to the roof of his parked cover car. "And now let's visit Mr. Polikoff," he said to himself. He patted his laser cube. For his first try at the android Polikoff, Rick stopped off at the offices of the Bay Area Scavengers Company. "I'm looking for an employee of yours," he said to the severe, gray-haired switchboard woman. The Scavengers building impressed him. Large and modern, it held a good number of high-class, purely office employees. The deep-pile carpets, the expensive genuine wood desks, reminded him that garbage collecting and trash disposal had, since the war, become one of Earth's important industries. The entire planet had been disintegrating to junk, and to keep the planet habitable for the remaining population, the junk had to be hauled away occasionally. Or, as Buster Friendly liked to declare, Earth would die under a layer, not of radioactive dust, but of kipple. "Mr. Actors," the switchboard woman informed him, "he's the personnel manager." She pointed to an impressive but imitation oak desk, at which sat a prissy, tiny, bespectacled individual, emerged with his plethora of paperwork. Rick presented his police ID. "Where's your employee Polikoff right now? At his job or at home?" After reluctantly consulting his records, Mr. Actors said, "Polikoff ought to be at work, flattening hover cars at our daily city plant and dumping them into the bay. However..." The personnel manager consulted a further document, then picked up his vidphone and made an inside call to someone else in the building. "He's not there," he said, terminating the call. Hanging up, he said to Rick, "Polikoff didn't show up for work today. No explanation. What's he got car, Rick next flew to Polikoff's apartment building in the Tenderloin. We'll never get him, he told himself. They, Bryant and Holden, waited too long. Instead of sending me to Seattle, Bryant should have sent me on Polikoff. Better still last night, as soon as Dave Holden got his. What a grimy place, he observed as he walked across the roof to the elevator. Abandoned animal pens encrusted with months of dust, and in one cage a no longer functioning false animal, a chicken. On elevator, he descended to Polikoff's floor, found the hall unlit, like a subterranean cave. Using his police A-powered seal clean light, he illuminated the hall and once again glanced over the onion skin carbon. The Voight comp test had been administered to Polikoff. That part could be bypassed, and he could go directly to the task of destroying the android. Best to get him from out here, he decided. Setting down his weapons kit, he fumbled it open, got out a non-directional Penfield wave transmitter. He punched the key for catalepsy, himself protected against remote emanation by means of a counterwave broadcast through the transmitter's metal hull, directed to him alone. Now all frozen stiff, he said to himself as he shut off the transmitter. Everyone, human and Andy alike, in the vicinity. No risk to me. All I have to do is walk in and laser him. Assuming, of course, that he's in his apartment, which isn't likely. Using an infinity key which analyzed and opened all forms of locks known, he entered Polikoff's apartment, laser beam in hand. No Polikoff. Only semi-ruined furniture, a place of kipple and decay. In fact, no personal articles. What greeted him consisted of unclaimed debris which Polikoff had inherited from the apartment, and which in leaving he had abandoned to the next, if any, tenant. I knew it, he said to himself. Well, there goes the first $1,000 round. Probably skipped all the way to the Antarctic Circle. Out of my jurisdiction. Mounted bounty hunter from another police department will retire Polikoff and claim the money. I suppose, to the Andes who haven't been warned, as was Polikoff. On to LEVEL Loft. Back again on the roof in his hover car, he reported by phone to Harry Bryant. No luck on Polikoff. Left probably right after he lasered Dave. He inspected his wristwatch. Want me to pick up Kadalyi at the field? It'll save time, and I'm eager to get started on Miss Luft. He already had the poop sheet on her laid out before him, and begun a thorough study of it. Good idea, Bryant said, except that Mr. Kadalyi is already here. His Aeroflot ship, as usual, he says, arrived early. Just a moment. An invisible conference. He'll fly over and meet you where you are now, Bryant said, returning to the screen. Meanwhile, read up on Miss Luft. An opera singer, allegedly from Germany, at present attached to the San Francisco Opera Company. He nodded in reflexive agreement, his mind on the poop sheet. Must have a good voice to make connections so fast. Okay, I'll wait here for Kadalyi. He gave Bryant his location and rang off. I'll pose as an opera fan, Rick decided as he read further. I particularly would like to see her as Donna Anna in Don Giovanni. In my personal collection I have tapes by such old-time greats as Elizabeth Schwarzkopf and Lotte Lehmann and Lisa Della Casa. That'll give us something to discuss while I set up my Voight comp equipment. His car phone buzzed. He picked up the receiver. The police operator said, Mr. Decker had a call for you from Seattle. Mr. Bryant said to put it through to you. From the Rosen Association. Okay, Rick said and waited. What did they want, he wondered. As far as he could discern, the Rosens had already proven to be bad news, and undoubtedly would continue so, whatever they intended. Rachel Rosen's face appeared on the tiny screen. Hello, Officer Deckard. Her tone seemed placating. That caught his attention. Are you busy right now, or can I talk to you? Go ahead, he said. We of the association have been discussing your situation regarding the escaped Nexus 6 types, and knowing them as we do, we feel that you'll have better luck if one of us works in conjunction with you. By doing what? Well, by one of us coming along with you, when you go out looking for them. Why? What would you add? Rachel said, the Nexus 6s would be wary at being approached by a human. But if another Nexus 6 made the contact, you specifically mean yourself.
Yes.
She nodded, her face sober. I've got too much help already.
But I really think you need me.
I doubt it. I'll think it over and call you back.
At some distant, unspecified future time, he said to himself.
Or more likely never. That's all I need. Rachel Rosen popping up through the dust at every step.
You don't really mean it, Rachel said. You'll never call me. You don't realize how agile and illegal escaped Nexus 6 is, how impossible it'll be for you. We feel we owe you this because of, you know, what we did.
I'll take it under advisement. He started to hang up.
Without me, Rachel said, one of them will get you before you can get it.
Goodbye, he said, and hung up.
What kind of world is it, he asked himself, when an android phones up a bounty hunter and offers him assistance?
He rang the police operator back. Don't put any more calls through to me from Seattle, he said.
Yes, Mr. Deckard. Has Mr. Kadagi reached you yet?
I'm still waiting, and he had better hurry because I'm not going to be here long.
Again, he hung up.
As he resumed reading the poop sheet on Nuba Loft, a hovercar taxi spun down to land on the roof a few yards off. From it, a red-faced, cherubic-looking man, evidently in his mid-50s, wearing a heavy and impressive Russian-style greatcoat, stepped, and, smiling, his hand extended, approached Rick's car.
Mr. Deckard?
The man asked with a Slavic accent.
The bounty hunter for the San Francisco Police Department?
The empty taxi rose, and the Russian watched it go absently.
I'm Sandor Kadagi,
the man said, and opened the car door to squeeze in beside Rick. As he shook hands with Kadagi, Rick noticed that the WPO representative carried an unusual type of laser tube, a subform which he had never seen before.
Oh, these?
Kadagi said.
Interesting, isn't it?
He tugged it from his belt holster.
I got these on Mars.
I thought I knew every handgun made, Rick said, even those manufactured at and for use in the colonies.
We made this ourselves,
Kadagi said, beaming like a Slavic Santa, his ruddy face inscribed with pride.
You like it? What is different about it, functionally, is... Here, take it.
He passed the gun over to Rick, who inspected it expertly by way of years of experience. How does it differ functionally? Rick asked. He couldn't tell.
Press the trigger.
Aiming upward, out the window of the car, Rick squeezed the trigger of the weapon. Nothing happened. No beam emerged. Puzzled, he turned to Kadagi.
The triggering circuit,
Kadagi said cheerfully.
Isn't attached. It remains with me, you see?
He opened his hand, revealed a tiny unit.
And I can also direct it within certain limits, irrespective of where it's aimed.
You're not Polakov, you're Kadagi, Rick said.
Don't you mean that the other way around? You're a bit confused.
I mean, you're Polakov the android. You're not from the Soviet police. Rick, with his toe, pressed the emergency button on the floor of his car.
Why won't my laser tube fire?
Kadagi, Polakov said, switching on and off the miniaturized triggering and aiming device which he held in the palm of his hand. A sine wave, Rick said, that phases out laser emanation and spreads the beam into ordinary light.
Then I'll have to break your pencil neck.
The android dropped the device and, with a snarl, grabbed with both hands for Rick's throat. As the android's hands sank into his throat, Rick fired his regulation-issue old-style pistol from its shoulder holster. The .38 Magnum slug struck the android in the head, and its brain box burst. The Nexus 6 unit, which operated it, blew into pieces, a raging, mad wind which carried throughout the car. Bits of it, like the radioactive dust itself, whirled down on Rick. The retired remains of the android rocked back, collided with the car door, bounced off, and struck heavily against him. He found himself struggling to shove the twitching remnants of the android away. Shakily, he at last reached for the car phone, called into the Hall of Justice. "Shall I make my report?" he said. "Tell Harry Bryant that I got Polakov."
You got Polakov. He'll understand that, will he?
"Yes," Rick said and hung up. Christ, that came close, he said to himself. I must have overreacted to Rachel Rosen's warning. I went the other way and it almost finished me. But I got Polikoff, he said to himself. His adrenal gland, by degrees, ceased pumping its several secretions into his bloodstream. His heart slowed to normal. His breathing became less frantic, but he still shook. Anyhow, I made myself $1,000 just now, he informed himself. So it was worth it. And I'm faster to react than Dave Holden. Of course, however, Dave's experience evidently prepared me. That has to be admitted. Dave had not had such warning. Again, picking up the phone, he placed a call home to his app, to Iran. Meanwhile, he managed to light a cigarette. The shaking had begun to depart. His wife's face, sodden with the 6-hour self-accusatory depression which she had prophesied, manifested itself on the vid screen. Oh, hello, Rick. What happened to the 594 I dialed for you before I left? Pleased acknowledgement of... I redialed as soon as you left. What do you want? Her voice sank into a dreary drone of despond. I'm so tired and I just have no hope left of anything. Of our marriage, and you possibly getting killed by one of those Andys? Is that what you want to tell me, Rick? That an Andy got you? In the background, the racket of Buster Friendly boomed and brayed, eradicating her words. He saw her mouth moving, but heard only the TV. Listen, he broke in. Can you hear me? I'm onto something. A new type of android that apparently nobody can handle but me. I've retired one already, so that's a grand to start with. You know what we're going to have before I'm through. Iran stared at him sightlessly. Oh, she said, nodding. I haven't said yet. You could tell now. Her depression this time had become too vast for her even to hear him. For all intents, he spoke into a vacuum. I'll see you tonight, he finished bitterly, and slammed the receiver down. Damn her, he said to himself. What good does it do my risking my life? She doesn't care whether we own an ostrich or not. Nothing penetrates. I wish I had gotten rid of her 2 years ago when we were considering splitting up. I can still do it, he reminded himself. Broodingly, he leaned down, gathering together on the car floor his crumpled papers, including the info on Lula Loft. No support, he informed himself. Most androids I've known have more vitality and desire to live than my wife. She has nothing to give me. That made him think of Rachel Rosen again. Her advice to me as to the Nexus 6 mentality, he realized, turned out to be correct. Assuming she doesn't want any of her bounty money, maybe I could use her. The encounter with Natalia Polikoff had changed his ideas rather massively. Snapping on his hovercar's engine, he whisked nippity-nip up into the sky, heading toward the old War Memorial Opera House, where, according to Dave Holden's notes, he would find Lula Luck this time of the day. He wondered now about her, too. Some female androids seemed to him pretty. He had found himself physically attracted by several, and it was an odd sensation, knowing intellectually that they were machines, but emotionally reacting anyhow. For example, Rachel Rosen. No, he decided, she's too thin. No real development, especially in the bust. A figure like a child's, flat and tame. He could do better. How old did the poop sheet say Luba Luck was? As he drove, he hauled out the now wrinkled notes, found her so-called age. 28, the sheet read. Judged by appearance, which with Andy's was the only useful standard. It's a good thing I know something about opera, Rick reflected. That's another advantage I have over Dave. I'm more culturally oriented. I'll try one more Andy before I ask Rachel for help, he decided. If Miss Luck proves exceptionally hard. But he had an intuition she wouldn't. Polikoff had been the rough one. The others, unaware that anyone actively hunted them, would crumble in succession, plugged like a file of ducks. As he descended toward the ornate, expansive roof of the opera house, he loudly sang a potpourri of arias with Syro-Italian words made up on the spot by himself. Even without the Penfield mood organ at hand, his spirits brightened into optimism and into hungry, gleeful anticipation. simple rhythm of the magic bells. What a pleasure. He loved the magic flute. He seated himself in a dress circle seat, no one appeared to notice him, and made himself comfortable. Now Papageno, in his fantastic pelt of bird feathers, had joined Pamina to sing words which always brought tears to Rick's eyes, when and if he happened to think about it. Tinte jeder brave Mann, solche Glücken finden, seine Feinde wurden dann ohne Mühe schwinden. Well, Rick thought, in real life no such magic bells exist that make your enemy effortlessly disappear. Too bad. And Mozart, not long after writing the magic flute, had died, in his 30s, of kidney disease, and had been buried in an unmarked pauper's grave. Thinking this, he wondered if Mozart had had any intuition that the future did not exist, that he had already used up his little time. Maybe I have too, Rick thought, as he watched the rehearsal move along. This rehearsal will end. The performance will end. The singers will die. Eventually, the last score of the music will be destroyed in one way or another. Finally, the name Mozart will vanish. The dust will have won. If not on this planet, then another. We can evade it a while, as the Andes can evade me and exist a finite stretch longer. But I get them, or some other bounty hunter gets them. In a way, he realized, I'm part of the form-destroying process of entropy. The Rosen Association creates, and I unmake. Or anyhow, so it must seem to them. On the stage, Papageno and Pamina engaged in a dialogue. He stopped his introspection to listen. Papageno. My child, what should we now say? Pamina. The truth. That's what we will say. Leaning forward and peering, Rick studied Pamina in her heavy, convoluted robes, with her wimple trailing its veil about her shoulders and face. He re-examined the poop sheet, then leaned back, satisfied. I've now seen my third Nexus 6 android, he realized. This is LEVEL. A little ironic, the sentiment her role calls for. However vital, active, and nice-looking, an escaped android could hardly tell the truth. About itself, anyhow. On the stage, LEVEL sang, and he found himself surprised at the quality of her voice. It rated with that of the best, even that of notables in his collection of historic tapes. The Rosen Association built her well, he had to admit. And again, he perceived himself, sub specie aeternitatis, the form destroyer called forth by what he heard and saw here. Perhaps the better she functions, the better a singer she is, the more I am needed. If the androids had remained substandard, like the ancient Q-40s made by Durain Associates, there would be no problem and no need of my skill. I wonder when I should do it, he asked himself. As soon as possible, probably. At the end of the rehearsal, when she goes to her dressing room. At the end of the act, the rehearsal ended temporarily. It would resume, the conductor said in English, French, and German, in an hour and a half. The conductor then departed. The musicians left their instruments and also left. Getting to his feet, Rick made his way backstage to the dressing rooms. He followed the tail end of the cast, taking his time and thinking, it's better this way, getting it immediately over with. I'll spend as short a time talking to her and testing her as possible. As soon as I'm sure, but technically he could not be sure until after the test. Maybe Dave guessed wrong on her, he conjectured. I hope so. But he doubted it. Already, instinctively, his professional sense had responded, and he had yet to err. Throughout years with the department. Stopping a super, he asked for Miss Luft's dressing room. The super, wearing makeup and the costume of an Egyptian spear carrier, pointed. Rick arrived at the indicated door, saw an ink-written note tacked to it reading Miss Luft, private, and knocked. Come in. He entered. The girl sat at her dressing table, a much-handled cloth-bound score open on her knees, marking here and there with a ballpoint pen. She still wore her costume and makeup, except for the wimple. That she had set down on its rack. Yes, she said, looking up. The stage makeup enlarged her eyes, enormous and hazel. They fixed on him and did not waver. I am busy, as you can see. Her English contained no remnant of an accent. Rick said, "You compare favorably to Schwarzkopf." "Who are you?" Her tone held cold reserve, and that other cold which he had encountered in so many androids. Always the same, great intellect, ability to accomplish much, but also this. And yet without it, he could not track them down. "I'm from the San Francisco Police Department," he said. "Oh?" The huge and intense eyes did not flicker, did not respond. "What do you hear about me?" The tone oddly seemed gracious. Seating himself in a nearby chair, he unzipped his briefcase. "I have been sent here to administer a standard personality profile test to you. It won't take more than a few minutes." "Is it necessary?" She gestured toward the big compound store. "I have a good deal I must do." Now she had begun to look apprehensive. "It's necessary." He got out the voice instruments, began setting them up. "An IQ test?" "No, I'll have to put on my glasses." She reached to open a drawer of her dressing table. "If you can mark the score without your glasses, you can take this test. I'll show you some pictures and ask you several questions." Meanwhile, he got up and walked to her, and bending, pressed a piece of pad of sensitive ribs against her deeply tinted cheek. "And this one," he said, adjusting the angle of the pencil. "And that's it." "Do you think I'm an android? Is that it?" Her voice had faded almost to extinction. "I'm not an android. I haven't even been on Mars. I've never even seen an android." The longer flashes shuddered involuntarily. He saw her trying to appear calm. "Do you have information that there's an android in the test? I'd be glad to help you. And if I were an android, would I be glad to help you?" "An android," he said, "doesn't care what happens to another android. That's one of the indications we look for." "Then," Miss Luck said, "you must be an android." Extract. He stared at her. "Because," she continued, "your job is to kill them, isn't it? You're what we call," she tried to remember. "A bounty hunter," Rick said. "I'm not an android." "This test you want to give me?" Her voice now had begun to return. "Have you taken it?" "Yes," he nodded. "A long time ago when I first started with the department." "Maybe that's a false memory. Don't androids sometimes go around with false memories?" Rick said, "My superiors know about the test. It's mandatory." "Maybe there was once a human who looked like you, and somewhere along the line you killed him and took his place, and your superiors don't know." She smiled, as if inviting him to agree. "Let's get on with the test," he said, getting out the sheets of questions. "I'll take the test," Lubelucht said, "if you'll take it first." Again he stared at her, stopped in his tracks. "Wouldn't that be more fair?" she asked. "Then I can be sure of you. I don't know, you seem so peculiar and hard and strange." She shivered, then smiled again, hopefully. "You wouldn't be able to administer the Voight-Kampf test. It takes considerable experience. Now please listen carefully. These questions will deal with social situations which you might find yourself in. What I want from you is a statement of response, what you do, and I want the response as quickly as you can give it. One of the factors I'll record is the time lag, if any." He selected his initial question. "You're sitting watching TV and suddenly you discover a wasp crawling on your wrist." He checked his watch, counting the seconds, and checked too with the twin dials. "What's a wasp?" Lubelucht asked. "A stinging bug that flies." "Oh, how strange." Her immense eyes widened with childlike acceptance, as if he had revealed the cardinal mystery of creation. "Do they still exist? I've never seen one." "They died out because of the dust. Don't you really know what a wasp is? You must have been alive when there were wasps. That's only been..." "Tell me the German word." He tried to think of the German word for wasp, but couldn't. "Your English is perfect," he said angrily. "My accent," she corrected, "is perfect. It has to be, for roles, for Purcell and Walton and Vaughan Williams, but my vocabulary isn't very large." She glanced at him shyly. "Vesper," he said, remembering the German word. "Ah, yes, I'm a Vespa," she laughed. impossible now to get a meaningful response. You are watching an old movie on TV, a movie from before the war. It shows a banquet in progress. The entree, we skipped over the first part of the question, consists of boiled dog stuffed with rice. Nobody would kill and eat a dog, Lubelucht said. They're worth a fortune, but I guess it would be an imitation dog, ersatz, right? But those are made of wires and motors. They can't be eaten. Before the war, Reagan. I wasn't alive before the war, but you've seen old movies on TV. Was the movie made in the Philippines? Why? Because, Lubelucht said, they used to eat boiled dog stuffed with rice in the Philippines. I remember reading that. But your response, he said, I want your social, emotional, moral reaction. To the movie, she pondered. I'd turn it off and watch Buster Friendly. Why would you turn it off? Well, she said hotly, who the hell wants to watch an old movie set in the Philippines? Whatever happened in the Philippines except the Bataan Death March? And would you want to watch that? She glared at him indignantly. On his dials, the needle swung in all directions. After a pause, he said carefully, you rent a mountain cabin. Yeah, she nodded. Go on, I'm waiting. In an area still verdant. And bushes growing. The cabin is rustic, knotty pine with a huge fireplace. On the walls, someone has hung old maps. Currier and Ives prints, and above the fireplace, a deer's head has been mounted, a full stag with developed horns. The people with you admire the decor of the cabin, and I don't understand Currier or Ives or decor, Lubelucht said. She seemed to be struggling, however, to make out the terms. Wait. She held up her hand earnestly. He decided to try another question. What else could he do? You're dating a man, he said, and he asks you to visit his apartment. While you're there... Oh, nine, Luba broke in. I wouldn't be there. That's easy to answer. That's not the question. Did you get the wrong question? But I understand that. Why is a question I understand the wrong one? Aren't I supposed to understand? Nervously fluttering, she rubbed her cheek. Desk. It dropped to the floor, skidded, and rolled under her dressing table. Ah, Gott, she muttered, bending to retrieve it. A ripping sound, that of cloth tearing. Elaborate costume. I'll get it, he said, and lifted her aside. He knelt down, groped under the dressing table until his fingers located the disc. When he stood up, he found himself looking into a laser tube. Your questions, Lubelucht said in a crisp, formal voice, began to do with sex. I thought they would finally. You're not from the police department. You're a sexual deviant. You can look at my identification. He reached toward his coat pocket. His hand, he saw, had again begun to shake, as it had with Polikoff. If you reach in there, Lubelucht said, I'll kill you. You will anyhow. He wondered how it would have worked out if he had waited until Rachel Rosen could join him. Well, no use dwelling on that. Let me see some more of your questions. She held out her hand, and reluctantly, he passed her the sheets. In a magazine, you come across a full-page color picture of a nude girl. Well, that's one. You became pregnant by a man who has promised to marry you. The man goes off with another woman, your best friend. You get an abortion. The pattern of your questioning is obvious. I'm going to call the police. Still holding the laser tube in his direction, she crossed the room, picked up the vid phone, dialed the operator. Connect me with the San Francisco Police Department, she said. I need a policeman. What you're doing, Rick said with relief, is the best idea possible. Yet it seemed strange to him that Luba had decided to do this. Why didn't she simply kill him? Once the patrolman arrived, her chance would disappear, and it all would go his way. She must think she's human, he decided. Obviously, she doesn't know. A few minutes later, during which Luba carefully kept the laser tube on him, a large harness bull arrived arrived in his archaic blue uniform with gun and star. "All right," he said at once to Luba. "Put that thing away." She set down the laser tube and he picked it up to examine it to see if it carried a charge. "Now what's been going on here?" he asked her. Before she could answer, he turned to Rick. "Who are you?" he demanded. Luba said, "He came into my dressing room. I've never seen him before in my life. He pretended to be taking a poll or something, and he wanted to ask me questions. I thought it was all right, and I said okay. And then he began asking me obscene questions." "Let's see your identification," the harness bull said to Rick, his hand extended. As he got out his ID, Rick said, "I'm a bounty hunter with the department." "I know all the bounty hunters," the harness bull said, as he examined Rick's wallet. "With the SF Police Department?" "My supervisor is Inspector Harry Bryant," Rick said. "I've taken over Dave Holden's list now that Dave's in the hospital." "As I say, I know all the bounty hunters," the harness bull said, "and I've never heard of you." He handed Rick's ID back to him. "Call Inspector Bryant," Rick said. "There isn't any Inspector Bryant," the harness bull said. It came to Rick what was going on. "You're an android," he said to the harness bull. "Like Miss Luft." Going to the vidphone, he picked up the receiver himself. "I'm going to call the department." He wondered how far he would get before the two androids stopped him. "The number," the harness bull said, "is, I know the number." Rick dialed, presently had the police switchboard operator. "Let me talk to Inspector Bryant," he said. "Who is calling, please?" "This is Rick Deckard." He stood waiting. Meanwhile, off to one side, the harness bull was getting a statement from Luba Luft. Neither paid any attention to him. A pause, and then Harry Bryant's face appeared on the vid screen. "What's doing?" he asked Rick. "Some trouble," Rick said. "One of those on Dave's list managed to call in and get a so-called patrolman out here. I can't seem to prove to him who I am. He says he knows all the bounty hunters in the department and he's never heard of me." He added, "He hasn't heard of you either." Bryant said, "Let me talk to him." "Inspector Bryant wants to talk to you." Rick held out the vidphone receiver. The harness bull ceased questioning Miss Love and came over to take it. "Officer Krams," the harness bull said briskly. A pause. "Hello?" He listened, said hello several times more, waited, then turned to Rick. "There's nobody on the line, and nobody on the screen." He pointed to the vidphone screen, and Rick saw nothing on it. Taking the receiver from the harness bull, Rick said, "Mr. Bryant?" He listened, waited. Nothing. "I'll dial again." He hung up, waited, and redialed the familiar number. The phone rang, but no one answered it. The phone rang on and on. "Let me try," Officer Krabs said, taking the receiver away from Rick. "You must have misdialed." He dialed. "The number is 842. "I know the number," Rick said. "Officer Krabs calling in," the harness bull said into the phone receiver. "Is there an Inspector Bryant connected with the department?" A short pause. "Well, what about a bounty hunter named Rick Deckard?" Again a pause. "You're sure? Could he have recently?" "Oh, I see. Okay, thanks. No, I have it under control." Officer Krabs rang off, turned toward Rick. "I had him on the line," Rick said. "I talked to him. He said he'd talk to you. It must be phone trouble. The connection must have been broken somewhere along the way. Didn't you see? Bryant's face showed on the screen, and then it didn't." He felt bewildered. Officer Krabs said, "I have Miss Luft's statement record, so let's go down to the Hall of Justice so I can book you." "Okay," Rick said. To Luba Luft, he said, "I'll be back in a short while. I'm still not finished testing you." "He's a deviant," Luba Luft said to Officer Krabs. "He gives me the creeps." She shivered. "What opera are you practicing to give?" Officer Krabs asked her. "The Magic Flute," Rick said. "I didn't ask you, I asked her." The harness bull gave him a glance of dislike. "I'm anxious to get to the Hall of Justice," Rick said. "This matter should be straightened out." He started toward the door of the dressing room, his briefcase gripped. "I'll search you first." Officer Krabs deftly frisked him and came up with Rick's service pistol and laser tube. He appropriated both, after a moment of sniffing the muzzle of the pistol. "This has been fired recently," he said. I retired an Andy just now, Rick said. The remains are still in my car up on the roof. Okay, Officer Krams said. We'll go up and have a look. As the two of them started from the dressing room, Miss Luff followed as far as the door. He won't come back again, will he, officer? I'm really afraid of him. He's so strange. If he's got the body of someone he killed upstairs in his car, Krams said, he won't be coming back. He nudged Rick forward, and together the two of them ascended by elevator to the roof of the Opera House. Opening the door of Rick's car, Officer Krams silently inspected the body of Polikoff. An android, Rick said. I was sent after him. He almost got me by pretending to be. They'll take your statement at the Hall of Justice, Officer Krams interrupted. He nudged Rick over to his parked, plainly marked police car. There, by police radio, he put in a call for someone to come pick up Polikoff. Okay, Decker, he said then, ringing off. Let's get started. With the two of them aboard, the patrol car zoomed up from the roof and headed south. Something Rick noticed was not as it should be. Officer Krams had steered the car in the wrong direction. The Hall of Justice, Rick said, is north, on Lombard. That's the old Hall of Justice, Officer Krams said. The new one is on mission. That old building is disintegrating. It's a ruin. Nobody's used that for years. Has it been that long since you last got booked? Take me there, Rick said. To Lombard Street. He understood it all now. Saw what the androids working together had achieved. He would not live beyond this ride. For him it was the end, as it had almost been for Dave, and probably eventually would be. That girl's quite a looker, Officer Krams said. Of course, with that costume, you can't tell about her figure. But I'd say it's damn okay. Rick said, "Admit to me that you're an android." Why? I'm not an android. What do you do, roam around killing people and telling yourself they're androids? I can see why Miss Luff was scared. It's a good thing for her that she called us. Then take me to the Hall of Justice on Lombard. Like I said. I'll take about 3 minutes, Rick said. I want to see it. Every morning I check in for work there. I want to see that it's been abandoned for years, as you say. Maybe you're an android, Officer Krams said, with a false memory like they give them. Had you thought of that? He grinned frigidly as he continued to drive south. Conscious of his defeat and failure, Rick settled back and helplessly waited for what came next. Whatever the androids had planned, now that they had physical possession of him. But I did get one of them, he told himself. I got Polikoff. And Dave got two. Hovering over mission, Officer Krams's police car prepared to descend for its landing. 10. The Mission Street Hall of Justice building, onto the roof of which the hover car descended, jutted up in a series of Baroque ornamented spires. Complicated and modern, the handsome structure struck Rick Deckard as attractive, except for one aspect. He had never seen it before. The police hover car landed, and a few minutes later, he found himself being booked. 304, Officer Krams said to the sergeant at the high desk. And 612.4, and let's see, representing himself to be a peace officer. 406.7, the desk sergeant said, filling out the forms. He wrote leisurely, in a slightly bored manner. Routine business, his posture and expression declared. Nothing of importance. Over here, Officer Krams said to Rick, leading him to a small white table at which a technician operated familiar equipment. For your cephalic pattern, Krams said. Ident purposes. Rick said brusquely, I know. In the old days, when he had been a harness bull himself, he had brought many suspects to a table like this. Like this, but not this particular table. His cephalic pattern taken, he found himself being led off to an equally familiar room. Reflexively, he began assembling his valuables for transfer. It makes no sense, he said to himself. Who are these people? If this place has always existed, why didn't we know about it? And why don't they know about us? Two parallel police agencies, he said to himself. Ours and this one. But never coming in contact, as far as I know, until now. Or maybe they have, he thought. Maybe this isn't the first time. Hard to believe, he thought, that this wouldn't have happened long ago. If this really is a police apparatus here, if it's what it asserts itself to be. A man, not in uniform, detached himself from the spot at which he had been standing. He approached Rick Deckard at a measured, unruffled pace, gazing at him curiously. "What's this one?" he asked Officer Krams. "Suspected homicide," Krams answered. "We have a body. We found it in his car, but he claims it's an android. We're checking it out, giving it a bone marrow analysis at the lab, and posing as a police officer, a bounty hunter, to gain access to a woman's dressing room in order to ask her suggestive questions. She doubted he was what he said he was and called us in." Stepping back, Krams said, "Do you want to finish up with him, sir?" "All right." The senior police official, not in uniform, blue-eyed, with a narrow flaring nose and inexpressive lips, eyed Rick, then reached for Rick's briefcase. "What do you have in here, Mr. Deckard?" Rick said, "Material pertaining to the Voight-Kampf personality test. I was testing a suspect when Officer Krams arrested me." He watched as the police official rummaged through the contents of the briefcase, examining each item. "The questions I asked Miss Loft are standard VK questions printed on the—" "Do you know George Gleason and Phil Resch?" the police official asked. "No," Rick said. Neither name meant anything to him. "They're the bounty hunters for Northern California. Both are attached to our department. Maybe you'll run into them while you're here. Are you an android, Mr. Deckard?" "The reason I ask is that several times in the past we've had escaped dandies turn up posing as out-of-state bounty hunters here in pursuit of a suspect," Rick said. "I'm not an android. You can administer the Voight-Kampf test to me. I've taken it before, and I don't mind taking it again. But I know what the results will be. Can I phone my wife?" "You're allowed one call. Would you rather phone her than a lawyer?" "I'll phone my wife," Rick said. "She can get a lawyer for me." The plainclothes police officer handed him a 50-cent piece and pointed. "There's the vidphone over there." He watched as Rick crossed the room to the phone. Then he returned to his examination of the contents of Rick's briefcase. Inserting the coin, Rick dialed his home phone number and stood for what seemed like an eternity, waiting. A woman's face appeared on the vid screen. "Hello," she said. It was not Iran. He had never seen the woman before in his life. He hung up, walked slowly back to the police officer. "No luck?" the officer asked. "Well, you can make another call. We have a liberal policy in that regard. I can't offer you the opportunity of calling a bondsman because your offense is unbailable at present. When you're arraigned, however—" "I know," Rick said acridly. "I'm familiar with police procedure." "Here's your briefcase," the officer said. He handed it back to Rick. "Come into my office. I'd like to talk with you further." He started down a side hall, leading the way. Rick followed. Then, pausing and turning, the officer said, "My name is Garland." He held out his hand, and they shook, briefly. "Sit down," Garland said as he opened his office door and pushed behind the large, uncluttered desk. Rick seated himself facing the desk. "This Voight-Kampf test," Garland said, "that you mentioned." He indicated Rick's briefcase. "All that material you carry." He filled and lit a pipe, puffed for a moment. "It's an analytical tool for detecting Andes?" "It's our basic test," Rick said. "The only one we currently employ. The only one capable of distinguishing the new Nexus 6 brain unit. You haven't heard of this test?" "I've heard of several profile analysis scales for use with androids, but not that one." He continued to study Rick intently, his face turgid. Rick could not fathom what Garland was thinking. "Those smudged carbon flimsies," Garland continued, "that you have there in your briefcase, Polakov, Miss Luft, your assignments. The next one is me." Rick stared at him, then grabbed for the briefcase. In a moment, the carbons lay spread out before him. Garland had told the truth. Rick examined the sheet. Neither man, or rather neither he nor Garland, spoke for a time. And then Garland cleared his throat, coughed nervously. "It's an unpleasant sensation," he said, "to find yourself a bounty hunter's assignment all of a sudden. Or whatever it is you are, his desk intercom and said, "Send one of the bounty hunters in here. I don't care which one." "Okay, thank you." He released the key. "Phil Resch will be in here a minute or so from now," he said to Rick. "I want to see his list before I proceed." "You think I might be on his list?" Rick said. "It's possible. We'll know pretty soon. Best to be sure about these critical matters. Best not to leave it to chance. This info sheet about me," he indicated the smudged carbon, "it doesn't list me as a police inspector. It inaccurately gives my occupation as insurance underwriter. Otherwise, it's correct as to physical description, age, personal habits, home address. Yes, it's me, all right. Look for yourself." He pushed the page to Rick, who picked it up and glanced over it. The office door opened, and a tall, fleshless man with hard-etched features, wearing horn-rimmed glasses and a fuzzy Van Dyke beard appeared. Garland rose, indicating Rick. "Phil Resch, Rick Deckard. You're both bounty hunters, and it's probably time you met." As he shook hands with Rick, Phil Resch said, "Which city are you attached to?" Garland answered for Rick. "San Francisco. Here, take a look at his schedule. This one comes up next." He handed Phil Resch the sheet which Rick had been examining, that with his own description. "Say, Gar," Phil Resch said, "this is you." "There's more," Garland said. "He's also got Lou Luck, the opera singer, there on his list of retirement assignments, and Polikoff. Remember Polikoff? He's now dead. This bounty hunter, or android, or whatever he is, got him, and we're running a bone marrow test at the lab to see if there's any conceivable basis." "Polikoff I've talked to," Phil Resch said. "That big Santa Claus from the Soviet police?" He pondered, plucking at his disarrayed beard. "I don't think it's a good idea to run a bone marrow test on him." "Why do you say that?" Garland asked, clearly annoyed. "It's to remove any legal basis on which this man Deckard could claim he hadn't killed anyone. He only retired an android." Phil Resch said, "Polikoff struck me as cold, extremely cerebral and calculating, detached." "A lot of the Soviet police are that way," Garland said, visibly nettled. "Rubalov never met," Phil Resch said, "although I've heard records she's made." To Rick, he said, "Did you test her out?" "I started to," Rick said, "but I couldn't get an accurate reading. And she called in a harness pull, which ended it." "And Polikoff?" Phil Resch asked. "I never got a chance to test him either." Phil Resch said, mostly to himself, "And I assume you haven't had an opportunity to test out Inspector Garland here?" "Of course not," Garland interjected, his face wrinkled with indignation. His words broke off, bitter and sharp. "What test do you use?" Phil Resch asked. "The Voight-Kampff scale." "Don't know that particular one." Both Resch and Garland seemed deep in rapid professional thought, but not in unison. "I've always said," he continued, "that the best place for an android would be with the big police organizations such as WPO. Ever since I first met Polikoff, I've wanted to test him, but no pretext ever arose. He never would have either, which is one of the values such a spot would have for an enterprising android." Getting slowly to his feet, Inspector Garland faced Phil Resch and said, "Have you wanted to test me too?" A discreet smile traveled across Phil Resch's face. He started to answer, then shrugged, and remained silent. He did not seem afraid of his superior, despite Garland's palpable wrath. "I don't think you understand the situation," Garland said. "This man, or android, Rick Deckard, comes to us from a phantom, hallucinatory, non-existent police agency allegedly operating out of the old departmental headquarters on Lombard. He's never heard of us, and we've never heard of him, yet ostensibly we're both working the same side of the street. He employs a test we've never heard of. The list he carries around isn't of androids, it's a list of human beings. He's already killed once, at least once, and if Miss Luck hadn't gotten to a phone, he probably would have killed her, and then eventually he would have come sniffing around after me." Phil Resch said. Garland mimicked wrathfully. He looked now as if he bordered on apoplexy. "Is that all you have to say?" The intercom came on, and a female voice said, "Inspector Garland, the lab report on Mr. Polikoff's corpse is ready." "I think we should hear it," Phil Resch said. Garland glanced at him, seething. Then he bent, pressed the key of the intercom. "Let's have it, Miss French."
The bone marrow test, Miss French said, shows that Mr. Polikoff was a humanoid robot. Do you want a detail? No, that's enough. Garland settled back in his seat, grimly contemplating the far wall. He said nothing to either Rick or Phil Rash. Rash said, "What is the basis of your voice health test, Mr. Decker?" Empathic response in a variety of social situations, mostly having to do with animals. Ours is probably simpler, Rash said. The reflex arc response taking place in the upper ganglia of the spinal column requires several microseconds more in a humanoid robot than in a human nervous system. Reaching across Inspector Garland's desk, plucked a pad of paper toward him. With a ballpoint pen, he drew a sketch. We use an audio signal or light flash. The subject presses a button and the elapsed time is measured. We try it a number of times, of course. Elapsed time varies in both the AND and the human. But by the time 10 reactions have been measured, we believe we have a reliable clue. And, as in your case with Polikoff, the bone marrow test backs us up. An interval of silence passed, and then Rick said, "You can test me out. I'm ready. Of course, I'd like to test you, too, if you're willing." "Naturally," Rex said. He was, however, studying Inspector Garland. "I've said for years," Resch murmured, "that the Bonelli reflex arc test should be applied routinely to police personnel. The higher up the chain of command, the better. Haven't I, Inspector?" "That's right, you have," Garland said. "And I've always opposed it, on the grounds that it would lower department morale." "I think now," Rick said, "you're going to have to sit still for it, in view of your lab's report on Polikoff." 11. Garland said, "I guess so." He jabbed a finger at the mounting for a while. "But I'm warning you, you're not going to like the results of the tests." "Do you know what they'll be?" Dresch asked, with visible surprise. He did not look pleased. "I know almost to a hair," Inspector Garland said. "Okay," Dresch nodded. "I'll go upstairs and get the Bonelli gear." He strode to the door of the office, opened it, and disappeared out into the hall. "I'll be back in 3 or 4 minutes," he said to Rick. The door shut after him. Reaching into the right-hand top drawer of his desk, Inspector Garland fumbled about and brought forth a laser tube. He swiveled it and pointed at Rick. "That's not going to make any difference," Rick said. "Resch will have a post-mortem run on me, the same as your lab ran on Polikoff, and he'll still insist on what did you call it? Bonelli reflex arc test on you and on himself." The laser tube remained in its position, and then Inspector Garland said, "It was a bad day all day, especially when I saw Officer Krams bringing you in. I had an intuition. That's why I intervened." By degrees, he lowered the laser beam. He sat gripping it, and then he shrugged and returned it to the desk drawer, locking the drawer and restoring the key to his pocket. "What will tests on the 3 of us show?" Rick asked. Garland said, "That damn fool, Rash. He actually doesn't know. He doesn't know. He doesn't suspect. He doesn't have the slightest idea. Otherwise, he couldn't live out a life as a bounty hunter, a human occupation, hardly an android occupation." Garland gestured toward Rick's briefcase. "Those other carbons, the other suspects you're supposed to test and retire, I know them all." He paused, then said, "We all came here together on the same ship from Mars. Not Resch, he stayed behind another week receiving the symbolic memory system." He was silent then. Or rather, it was silent. Rick said, "What'll he do when he finds out?" "I don't have the foggiest idea," Garland said remotely. "It ought, from an abstract intellectual viewpoint, to be interesting. He may kill me, kill himself, maybe you too. He may kill everyone he can, human and android alike. I understand that such things happen when there's been a synthetic memory system laid down, when one thinks it's human. So when you do that, you're taking a chance." Garland said, "It's a chance anyway, breaking free and coming here to Earth, where we're not even considered animals, where every worm and woodlouse is considered more desirable than all of us put together." Irritably, Garland picked at his lower lip. "Your position would be better if Phil Resch could pass the Bonelli test. If it was just me, the results that way would be predictable. Resch, I'd just be another Andy to retire as soon as possible. So you're not in a good position either, Deckard. Almost as bad, in fact, as I am. You know where I guessed wrong? I didn't know about Polikov. He must have come here earlier. Obviously, he came here earlier. In another group entirely, no contact with ours. He was already entrenched in the WPO when I arrived. I took a chance on the lab report, which I shouldn't have. Krams, of course, took the same chance. Polikov was almost my finish, too, Rick said. Yes, there was something about him. I don't think he could have been the same brain unit type as we. He must have been souped up or tinkered with, an altered structure unfamiliar even to us. A good one, too, almost good enough. When I phoned my apartment, Rick said, why didn't I get my wife? All our vidphone lines here are trapped. They recirculate the call to other offices within the building. This is a homeostatic enterprise we're operating here, Deckard. We're a closed loop, cut off from the rest of San Francisco. We know about them, but they don't know about us. Sometimes an isolated person such as yourself wanders in here, or as in your case, is brought here for our protection. He gestured convulsively toward the office door. Here comes Eager Beaver Phil Resch back with his handy-dandy portable little test. Isn't he clever? He's going to destroy his own life and mine, and possibly yours. You androids, Rick said, don't exactly cover for each other in times of stress. Garland snapped. I think you're right. It would seem we lack a specific talent you humans possess. I believe it's called empathy. The office door opened. Phil Resch stood outlined, carrying a device which trailed wires. Here we are, he said, closing the door after him. He seated himself, plugging the device into the electrical outlet. Bringing out his right hand, Garland pointed at Resch. At once, Resch, and also Rick Deckard, rolled from their chairs and onto the floor. At the same time, Resch yanked a laser cube, and as he fell, fired at Garland. The laser beam, aimed with skill based on years of training, bifurcated Inspector Garland's head. He slumped forward, and from his hand, his miniaturized laser beam rolled across the surface of his desk. The corpse teetered on its chair, and then, like a sack of eggs, it slid to one side and crashed to the floor. You'd forgotten, Resch said, rising to his feet, that this is my job. I can almost foretell what an android is going to do. I suppose you can too. He put his laser beam away, bent, and with curiosity examined the body of his quantum superior. What did it seem he was gone? That it was an android, and you, Rick broke off the conduit of his brain humming, calculating and selecting. He altered what he had started to say. Would detect it, he finished. In a few more minutes. Anything else? This building is android infested. Resch said introspectively. That's going to make it hard for you and me to get out of here. Nominally, I have the authority to leave anytime I want, of course, and take a prisoner with me. He listened. No sound came from beyond the office. I guess they didn't hear anything. There's evidently no bug installed here, monitoring everything. As there should be. Gingerly, he nudged the body of the android with the toe of his shoe. It certainly is remarkable, the psionic ability you develop in this business. I knew before I opened the office door that he would take a shot at me. Frankly, I'm surprised he didn't kill you while I was upstairs. He almost did, Rick said. He had a big utility model laser beam on me part of the time. He was considering it, but it was you he was worried about, not me. The android flees, Resch said humorlessly, where the bounty hunter pursues. You realize, don't you, that you're going to have to double back to the Opera House and get Luba Luft before anyone here has a chance to warn her as to how this came out. Warn it, I should say. Do you think of them as it? I did it one time, Rick said, when my conscience occasionally bothered me about the work I had to do. I protected myself by thinking of them that way, but now I no longer find it necessary. All right, I'll head directly back to the Opera House, assuming you can get me out of here. Suppose we sit Garland up in his desk, Resch said. He dragged the corpse of the android back up into
chair, arranging its arms and legs so that its posture appeared reasonably natural if no one looked closely, if no one came into the office. Pressing a key on the desk intercom, Phil Resch said, "Inspector Garland has asked that no calls be put through to him for the next half hour. He's involved in work that can't be interrupted." "Yes, Mr. Resch." Releasing the intercom key, Phil Resch said to Rick, "I'm going to handcuff you to me during the time we're still here in the building. Once we're airborne, I'll naturally let you go." He produced a pair of cuffs, slapped one onto Rick's wrist, and the other around his own. "Come on, let's get it over with." He squared his shoulders, took a deep breath, and pushed open the office door. Uniformed police stood or sat on every side, conducting their routine business of the day. None of them glanced up or paid any attention as Phil Resch led Rick across the lobby to the elevator. "What I'm afraid of," Resch said as they waited for the elevator, "is that the Garland one had a dead man's throttle warning component built into it. But," he shrugged, "I would have expected it to go off by now. Otherwise, it's not much good."
I think it's criminal that we're not permitted to make dramatic note of social evils as they exist, of controversial themes as they are inherent in our society. I think it's ridiculous that drama, which by its very nature should make a comment on those things that affect our daily lives. Welcome to my asylum of horrors.
Bring the dead with the beast yard over.
That they needed afterwards a little light relief.
What a load of snotty rubbish! Of course video games can't make you violent, and anybody who says they can, I'll rip off their heads and write their name on the wall with the blood from their tonsils.
Evil does seek to maintain power by suppressing the truth.
Your existence has ended.
Undead, undead, undead. Undead, undead, undead.
It's like a disgusting shell of that idea.
I believe it symbolizes the conformity to a larger society of social oppression.